Chapter 48. Although the tiger demon was dead, its dead form was still useful to Li Mu. Its soul had already been scattered by Xuandu, but its spirit was still in its body. Extracting its courage would be of great help to Li Mu in condensing the three reverse spirits. Xuandu was a little disappointed, but he still said, "This demon has done a lot of evil and deserved to die. I still have some use for its tiger skin. If you want to extract its courage, you can do so yourself." Li Mu walked to Li Qing and whispered, "Boss, how do I extract its courage?" Li Changliang performed a hand incantation gesture, and a cloud of mist slowly drifted out from the tiger demon's body, which had been ravaged beyond recognition by Xiandu. Li Qing did not give the tiger demon's courage to him directly. It would only be useful after he had absorbed enough anger. Xuandu looked at the completely dark sky and said to the two, "Amit Ba, this place is not close to the county. It is difficult to travel at night. The Jinshan temple is nearby. Why don't you two rest in the temple for the night and return tomorrow?" Li Mu looked at Li Qing and waited for her to make a decision. Li Qing looked at him and nodded. "Then we will disturb you, master." Since Li Qing agreed, Li Mu naturally had no objections. In this darkness, with her high cultivation, there was no problem for her to travel. To Li Mu it was a little difficult to travel at night in the mountains. Li Mu woke up the two weasel demons. When the weasels woke up, the first thing they did was to kneel on the ground and tremble. "Tiger King, please spare us, please spare us." Before the tiger became a demon, it was the king of the mountains. After becoming a demon, the demons had to hide. They did not even dare to emit a bit of demon aura. Otherwise, they would become food in the tiger's mouth. It thought it was going to die, so it did not care so much and did not hide its demon aura. This attracted the tiger demon. Even if the two of them transformed, they were no match for the tiger demon, let alone now. The weasel was sad. It was lucky not to be killed by human cultivators, but to be buried in the tiger's mouth. Li Mu glanced at the frightened weasel and said, "Get up, the tiger king is dead." "Be dead?" The weasel looked up and saw the tiger demon's corpse not far away. It was so scared that it sat on the ground. Xuandu picked up the tiger demon's corpse with one hand and walked forward along the mountain path. Li Mu and Li Qing followed behind him. The two weasels also quickly got up and followed. On the way to the Jinshan temple, Li Mu learned that the name of the weasel was Yellow Rat. It was a weasel that had been cultivating for 50 years. And the injured weasel was his wife. A month ago, the weasel's wife was injured by a cultivator. That cultivator wanted to take its soul for cultivation. Although it tried to escape, its foundation was destroyed. If Li Mu did not help, it would not have lived for more than 3 days. Li Mu just repaired a little of its foundation. If it wanted to fully recover, it would need to use the light of Buddha a few more times. After the incident with Lin Wan and the weasel's wife, Li Mu vaguely felt that not all light of Buddha had such an effect. The Heart Sutra should have more than one use. It was just that he had not discovered it yet. Xuandu said that the Jinshan temple was not far from here. The three of them walked for half an hour. The temple standing on the mountainside was not big, but it was not small either. Seeing Xuandu return, the two acolytes guarding the gate immediately trotted over and said respectfully, "Martial uncle?" Xuandu said, "These two benefactors need to stay in the temple for a night. Arrange 2 meditation rooms for them." The acolytes looked at Li Mu and Li Qing and nodded repeatedly. Although there was a rule in the temple that female benefactors were not allowed to stay overnight, Martial Uncle Xuandu had never talked about rules. Even the abbot could not do anything about it. Xuandu threw the tiger's corpse on the ground and said, "This tiger demon has done a lot of evil. Carry it in later and put it in the woodshed. Tomorrow, give it to the tailor at the foot of the mountain and ask him to make a tiger skin mattress for the abbot." The weasel stood outside and looked at Li Mu. He said nervously, "Immortal master, I can't enter the temple. I'll wait outside. As long as there were real Buddhist cultivators in the temple, it would be blessed by the light of Buddha. It would be difficult for demons and ghosts to enter. Even if the weasel couple went in, they would be on tenterhooks." Li Mu nodded and said, "You can go back first. Wait for us here tomorrow morning." He was not worried that the two demons would run away. The weasel's wife's foundation had not recovered. If she ran away, it would still be difficult for her to escape. Although the weasel was a demon, he was also affectionate and righteous. He would not run away alone. The acolytes were agile and quickly tidied up 2 clean meditation rooms for them. Li Mu thought that Li Qing would ask him something, but she only told Li Mu to rest early and go back to the yamen early tomorrow morning. Then she walked into the meditation room next door. After being busy for half a day, Li Mu was already a little tired. After coming to the Jinshan temple, he became energetic again. There was a sandalwood scent in the meditation room, which calmed one's mind. Li Mu's mind was focused on the sky. As he was habitually guiding the practice, he suddenly remembered that this was the holy land of Buddhism. It seemed to be a little offensive to practice Taoist cultivation here. Coincidentally, there was a Buddhist scripture beside the futon. Li Mu took it and casually flipped through a few pages. There were two kinds of Buddhist scriptures. One was the ordinary scripture, which was also the scripture that believers chanted daily. This kind of scripture could be chanted casually and would not appear the light of Buddha. The other kind was the Dharma Sutra. The Dharma Sutra contained the magic of Buddhism. Chanting it could increase the Dharma power or perform Shintong. The light of Buddha was the most common Shintong of Buddhism. Of course, the Jinshan temple would not put the Dharma Sutra in the meditation room. The one in Li Mu's hand was just an ordinary scripture. A few days ago, when he asked for a few talismans from Li Qing and used them to search his memory, Li Mu found that among the few Buddhist scriptures that he had read, only the Heart Sutra could cause the light of Buddha to appear. He could not explain the reason, but he was not greedy. The Heart Sutra had saved him many times. As his Dharma power increased, he might find other magical uses. He sat cross-legged on the futon and began to chant the Heart Sutra silently using the art of silence. This time there was no golden light on Li Mu's body. Previously he felt that when a monk cultivated, he should not become a walking light source, illuminating wherever he went. On the way to the Jinshan temple, Li Mu asked Xuandu and found out that when chanting the Dharma Sutra, the light of Buddha could be concealed. Xuandu wanted to persuade Li Mu to convert. When he talked about this concealment method, he was not stingy and taught him immediately. Li Mu could finally cultivate Buddhism without worrying about the problem of the light. While Li Mu was chanting and cultivating in the Jinshan temple in the Buddhist hall, a few novice monks looked up. Light and shadow intertwined on their faces, flickering. If one looked closely, they would find that it was not their faces that were flickering, but the golden body of the Buddha statue in the hall that was emitting a golden light. One of the novice monks reacted and immediately said, "Go and tell the abbot." Li Mu was cultivating when he suddenly heard the sound of footsteps outside the meditation room, disturbing his concentration. He thought that the Jinshan temple was on fire. When he opened the door, he saw Li Qing coming out of the meditation room next door. Li Mu was puzzled and asked, "What happened?" Li Qing looked in the direction of the Buddhist hall and said, "I heard from the monks that the Buddha statue in the hall was shining for no reason just now." Li Mu and Li Qing were only guests and it was not good for them to walk around in the temple. Therefore, although he was curious, he did not go and join in the fun. He only asked Li Qing, "The Buddha statue can also shine?" Li Qing explained, "The Buddha statue in the Jinshan temple has been worshipped by pilgrims all year round and has long been a kind of spiritual treasure. The Buddha statue will not shine for no reason. It should be because it is attracted by something." Li Mu's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly remembered something. That night, when he helped Lin Wan for the first time, it seemed that there was also a strange phenomenon in the nearby temple, but he did not think much of it at that time. However, the second time this happened, the possibility of it being a coincidence was very small. He swallowed and asked, "Could it be because someone is chanting the scriptures?" "It shouldn't be." Li Qing shook her head and said, "The masters of the Jinshan temple chant the scriptures day and night. These Buddha statues have been here for hundreds of years. If there was a strange phenomenon, it would have happened long ago. It would not have waited until today unless a new scripture came out." Li Mu's throat moved and he said, "Maybe there is another reason." Li Qing looked in the direction of the Buddhist hall and said, "Half a month ago, there were many strange phenomena in the ancestral court of Fulu school. The Taoist scriptures trembled and the Taoist bell kept ringing, as if new Taoist magic arts were being created. It has attracted the attention of countless cultivators. Now, similar phenomena have appeared in Buddhism. Something must have happened in Beijing." Li Mu stood there in a daze. Li Qing noticed his strange behavior and asked, "What's wrong?" Li Mu suddenly yawned and said with a smile, "I'm suddenly a little tired. I'll go back to my room to rest. Good night, boss." Chapter 49. Early in the morning, when the morning bell of the Jinshan temple rang, Li Mu got out of bed in a meditation room. Last night, when he heard that there was a strange phenomenon in the Jinshan temple, he was so scared that he didn't practice for the whole night. Instead, he had a good sleep. Half a month ago, Li Mu suddenly had an idea. He used many Taoist scriptures from his previous life to replace the mantra and tried to use Taoist techniques to investigate the matter of Zhao Yang's soul detachment. When he met Lin Wan, he used the Heart Sutra to replace the Buddhist scriptures for the first time, which led to the Buddha's light of salvation. Whether it was the Taoist scriptures or the Heart Sutra, it was the first time that they appeared in this world. Li Mu also learned yesterday that when these Taoist scriptures that could trigger the power of heaven and earth appeared for the first time, they would be sensed by some existence or special objects and produce some special movements. Li Mu still remembered Su He's advice. An ordinary man was innocent, but he was guilty of possessing a treasure. Taoist scriptures were coveted even by the powerful people in the middle realm. Li Mu had these secrets, and the fewer people who knew, the better. Therefore he didn't intend to tell even his most trusted Li Qing. There was a knock on the door. Li Mu walked over and opened the door. He saw a little bald head. The little monk brought in the things for washing up and brought them into the room. He said, "After washing up, you can come to the western dining hall for breakfast." "Thank you," Li Mu said politely. He always felt that the little monk was a little strange. When he left, he secretly observed with his heavenly eye and couldn't help but be stunned. This little monk was actually a demonic being. His true form was that of a golden eagle. Strangely, there was no demonic aura on his body. In his body, there was a looming Buddha's light. This greatly surprised Li Mu. The Jinshan temple was truly an evil place. This shape-shifted demon was clearly a Buddhist cultivator. Not only that, when he arrived at the dining hall with Li Qing, Li Mu was surprised to find that the young novice monk was not the only shape-shifted demon in the temple. Other than the demons, there were even ghosts that did not have the slightest bit of ghost chi. They were chopping firewood and fetching water in the backyard. They were extremely busy. His intuition told Li Mu that these demonic ghosts had something to do with Xuandu. That monk loved to reason with demonic ghosts. If he could not convince them, he would resort to violence. Then those demonic ghosts that were unwilling to be redeemed by him would cry and beg him to redeem them. Xuandu was not here. Li Mu and Li Qing found a corner and sat down. A novice monk brought them food. Breakfast in the Jinshan temple was very simple. There were only steamed buns, vegetables, and a bowl of tofu soup. Li Qing ate very slowly. Li Mu, who had been hungry all night, finished his breakfast quickly. While waiting for her, he listened to the conversation of the monks next to him. Last night, the Buddha statue in the hall shone again. Master said that this kind of vision only appears once in 100 years. I heard from martial uncle Xuandu that someone comprehended a new Dharma scripture. That's why the golden body in the hall resonated. He also said that last night, a senior with profound Dharma passed by the Jinshan temple. Perhaps it was because of that senior. Martial uncle Xuandu went out again last night. When he came back, he killed an evil tiger demon. When can we be as powerful as martial uncle Xuandu? Then we can be like him and get rid of evil for the people. Speaking of the tiger demon, let's eat quickly. After breakfast, we still have to go down the mountain and hand the tiger skin to the tailor. Martial uncle Xuandu said that he wanted to use this tiger skin to make a tiger skin mattress for the abbot. The abbot was injured by that evil person when he attacked the heretical cultivation last time. He hasn't recovered yet. Seeing that the monks in the Jinshan temple did not suspect him, Li Mu finally heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, he made up his mind to stay away from temples and Taoist temples when he cultivated in the future. Who knew if there would be something glowing for no reason when he cultivated? After Li Qing finished her meal, the two of them bid farewell to Xuandu. Li Mu bowed to Xuandu and said, "We'll be staying at your temple tonight. Sorry for disturbing you. We still have work to do, so we won't disturb Master Xuandu." Xuandu smiled and said, "Young benefactor, you have an affinity with Buddha. The door of the Jinshan temple will always be open for you." Li Mu immediately said, "My 6 senses are not pure. I won't cause trouble for Buddhism." After leaving the Jinshan temple with Li Qing, Li Mu heaved a sigh of relief. Xuandu looked gentle and refined, but in fact he liked violence and was unreasonable. If he insisted on keeping Li Mu in the Jinshan temple, even Li Qing would not be able to stop him. Fortunately, he did not use force on Li Mu. On the contrary, he answered many of Li Mu's questions about Buddhist cultivation. Li Mu benefited a lot from this trip out of the city. The yellow weasel couple had been waiting outside the Jinshan temple for a long time. The yellow weasel carried a bulging bag full of medicinal herbs on his back. The two weasels walked upright like humans and swaggered through the streets. It was somewhat inappropriate. Li Qing gave them 2 fulu. After the yellow weasel couple stuck it on their bodies, they disappeared into thin air in front of Li Mu. Li Mu channeled his mana to his eyes, but he still could not see them. It was not until he used his all-seeing eye that the 2 demons appeared in front of him again. The effect of this abhijna was much greater than Li Mu had expected. Even with his meager dermic powers, he could easily cast it. Although it could not be called a Dao technique, it was still an extremely mysterious abhijna. It was unexpected that a small vengeful spirit would know this kind of supernatural power. Li Qing said, "This is just a simple camouflage talisman. It can fool the eyes of ordinary people, but it cannot fool cultivators. When you reach the soul condensation stage, you will be able to see through it." Li Mu had only condensed one of his 7 spirits. He did not know when he would be able to condense his soul. After solving the Yellow Weasel case, he still had to go to the Union Pavilion and continue playing the role of a storyteller. On the way back to the county, Li Mu once again used the light of Buddha on the Yellow Weasel's wife to save her life. Although Li Mu had already condensed his first spirit, Li Mu did not waste the gratitude of the 2 demons towards him. After refining these emotions, his first spirit would become even more sensitive. After returning to the county, Li Mu had just stepped into the county office when he bumped into Xianxia. After returning from the Bay of Clearwater, Xianxia had taken a leave of absence. It was said that he had lost too much of his essence and had been cultivating in seclusion for a period of time. When he saw Li Qing, Xianxia smiled and asked, "When did Miss Qing come back?" "A few days ago," Li Qing said lightly and walked straight into the county office. Xianxia's gaze swept over Li Mu and saw the bai sword in his hand. He then looked back at Li Qing's Qinghong sword and asked Li Mu, "Where did you get your sword?" "The boss gave it to me." Li Mu also replied lightly and followed Li Qing out. Xianxia stood at the door with a look of surprise on his face. The 2 swords were very similar in appearance. Although this did not mean anything, seeing a lowly constable holding a sword similar to his sweetheart's made him feel uncomfortable. However, this discomfort only lasted for a moment. He and Li Qing were both disciples of the Fulu school. Although they did not belong to the same school, they were from the same school. The small Yangqiu county was only a part of their experience. Li Mu was just a lowly constable and was destined to not have much interaction with them. Xianxia looked back again and turned to walk out of the county office. In the front hall of the county office, Jianghu County Magistrate sat at the top and glanced at the 2 weasels kneeling below. He said, "2 demons, although you did not harm anyone, you have damaged the property of the villagers of Jianghu village. I will punish you by making you compensate them double the amount of their losses. Do you have any objections?" "We'll listen to you, sir. We'll listen to you." The 2 weasels knelt on the ground and kowtowed as if they were pounding garlic. Li Mu stood to the side. Jianghu County magistrates did not punish the weasel couple more severely because they were demons. This punishment was completely in accordance with the laws of the Great Zhou. As for the medicinal herbs that the weasels collected, any one of them could be sold for hundreds or thousands of chickens and ducks. For the weasels, this punishment was not serious. If it weren't for the fact that 2 monsters were involved in this case, County Magistrate Jiang wouldn't even need to come forward. Li Mu could handle it by himself. Jianghu County magistrates calculated with a brush and said, "Jianghu village lost a total of 15 chickens and 2 sheep. The market price of each chicken is 50 copper coins, so double is 100 copper coins. For 15 chickens, you will be fined 1,500 copper coins. The market price of a sheep is 1,000 copper coins, so double is 2,000 copper coins. 2 sheep are 4,000 copper coins, so the total is 5 taels and 5 coins. What do you have to say about the handling of this case?" The weasel was stunned and said, "Sir, the 15 chickens were done by me, but I have never stolen a sheep." Jianghu County magistrates frowned and looked at it. He asked, "The 2 sheep of Jianghu village were bitten in the neck and had their blood sucked dry. Do you dare say that you did not do it?" "Sir, I'm innocent." The weasel fell to the ground with a plop and said, "I have never stolen a sheep. Sheep are too smelly. Their blood makes me sick." Jianghu County magistrate stood up suspiciously and asked, "If it wasn't you, who could it be?" Li Mu also looked puzzled. Since the weasel had admitted to stealing the chickens plus the 2 sheep, it would just be a few more taels of silver. If the weasel had really sucked the blood of the 2 sheep, there was no need for him to deny it. Could it be that the case of Jianghu village involved other demons? At this moment, a burst of hurried footsteps came from outside. Zhang Shan ran in panting. He said, "Sir, bad news. Something happened in Jianghu village." Chapter 50. Jianghu Family Village. Squire Mansion. A pale-faced male corpse was lying on the ground. There were 2 bloody holes on the side of his neck. The blood in his body had been sucked dry. His face was ferocious and frightened. Before he died, he had obviously suffered a great shock. Zhang Shan, Li Si, and the other 3 constables hid far behind. Xianxia stood beside the corpse with a gloomy face. The deceased was a squire of Jianghu Family Village. This morning he was found dead in his backyard by his servants. The servants immediately reported it to the authorities. After learning that this case was strange and was likely to be the work of a demon, Jianghu County magistrates immediately asked Li Qing and Hanja to bring people to investigate. Landlord Zhang's death was tragic. Li Mu endured the discomfort and stood beside Li Qing. He asked, "Boss, can you tell what kind of demon did this?" Hanja squatted down and stretched out his right hand. He measured the distance of the bloody holes on the corpse's neck with his thumb and index finger. Then he stood up and said with a serious expression, "It's not a demon. It's a zombie." Li Mu could feel that after Hanja spoke, Li Qing's expression also became more serious. She looked at Hanja and asked, "What level of zombie is it?" "It's at least a jumping zombie." Hanja took a deep breath and said in surprise, "When did jumping zombies appear in Xianxia County? Did it come from Zhou County next door?" Li Qing thought for a moment and shook her head. Zhou County is in the east and Jianghu family village is in the west. It shouldn't be from Zhou County. Whether it is or not, we're in big trouble this time. Hanja said in a deep voice, "This thing is different from demons and ghosts. They have no humanity at all. If they hurt people once, they will hurt people again. We have to find and get rid of it as soon as possible." Li Mu's previous understanding of zombies all came from Hong Kong and Taiwan movies in the 80s and 90s. One of his favorite Hong Kong and Taiwan stars was the zombie Taoist Lin Jingying. He was obsessed with his zombie movies. The zombies in this world were not the kind that jumped around in Qing dynasty official uniforms. According to the records of demons in the 10 continents, zombies were transformed from human corpses after death. They were born from the resentment of heaven and earth. They were immortal, and could move according to the seasons. They liked to eat the blood essence of humans and animals. Low-level zombies were white zombies, black zombies, and jumping zombies. White zombies were covered with white hair, which meant they had just turned into zombies and were very easy to deal with. They were very afraid of sunlight and moved slow. White zombies ate the blood essence of cows and sheep. After a few years, they shed their white hair and were replaced by black hair that was a few inches long. They were called black zombies. Black zombies were still afraid of sunlight and fire. They were still slow and could not catch up with normal humans. Black zombies absorbed EN and sucked blood for a few more decades. Black zombies shed their black hair and became jumping zombies. They moved mainly by jumping. They jumped faster and farther. Although they were still afraid of light, their bodies were made of copper and iron. Ordinary weapons and even magic weapons could not hurt them. According to this classification, most of the zombies in the zombie movies Li Mu watched belonged to the jumping zombies. Zombies were not human, ghost, or demon. They did not have intelligence and moved purely by instinct. Because of this, they were much more dangerous than demons and ghosts. Any demon and ghost with a little brain knew that they should not harm people easily. Otherwise, they would become the target of the imperial court. But zombies were different. They were transformed from human corpses. Their intelligence had disappeared along with the dissipation of the three souls. Their only instinct was to evolve by sucking blood. Before they evolved into flying stiff, all zombies only had instinct and no intelligence. This made them much more dangerous. Almost every time there were traces of zombies, the government would eliminate them immediately to avoid causing more harm. Hanja left the minister's mansion and said to the people of Jianghu family village outside, "Arrange a few people to burn landlord Zhang's body immediately." An old man walked out with a cane and said with difficulty, "Official, this is not good. A dead person needs to be buried for peace." Hanja looked at him and asked, "You are?" The old man said, "I am the uncle of the deceased Zhang Dafu. It's up to you whether you want to burn it or not." Hanja smiled coldly and said, "But let me tell you, he was bitten to death by zombies. He will become a living corpse tonight. Even if you bury him, he will climb out of the ground. Living corpses can sense people with similar blood. When the time comes, the first one they will bite will be you. Burn it immediately." The old man's face became serious. He stabbed his cane on the ground and said to the two strong men, "Zhang De, Zhang Er, go find firewood immediately and burn the body. Why don't you listen to the official's words?" After the old man finished speaking, he seemed to think of something and said in horror, "Half a month ago my brother Zhang Dafu's father, his grave was dug up. His body went nowhere. Could it be?" Hanja frowned and asked, "How long has your brother been dead?" The old man said, "Less than a month ago." "Impossible." Hanja shook his head and said, "If you want to become a living corpse, you need at least 20 years of cultivation. Who in your Zhang family has been dead for more than 20 years? Go and see if there are any abnormalities in their graves." The old man pointed at several people and said, "You guys go and see." Li Mu heard some knowledge he was familiar with from Hanja's mouth. He asked Li Qing curiously, "Boss, will zombies really kill their relatives first?" Li Qing nodded and explained. In addition to absorbing yin qi and moonlight, zombies also need to rely on human blood essence to cultivate. The blood of their relatives is of the same origin as them. For them it is a fatal attraction. Li Mu murmured, Uncle Ling really didn't deceive me? Li Qing asked. What? Nothing. Li Mu shook his head and asked again, then do we need to prepare paper, brush, ink, swords? Xianxia came up and asked doubtfully, what paper, brush, ink, swords? Yellow paper, red brush, black ink, kitchen knife, wooden sword. Hanja came over and looked at Li Mu in surprise. I didn't expect you to know these. Li Mu recalled a figure in a Taoist robe and said, I learned from a Taoist priest before. Hanja didn't say anything more. He just asked the villagers of Jianghu family village to find a chicken. After killing the chicken, he used the chicken blood, ink and a red brush to draw a fulu. He lit the fulu and mixed the ash with the chicken blood. He said to Xianxia and the other constables, you guys, smear it on the blade and then take some villagers to the nearby mountains to search. Pay attention to the graveyard and mass graves. If you find anything, come back immediately. A constable trembled and came up. Boss, what should we do if we encounter that thing? Hanja glanced at him and said, don't worry, that thing is afraid of sunlight, so it won't appear during the day. But you must come back before the sun sets. If you encounter an accident, set off fireworks to call for help. Li Mu's bai sword was originally a magic weapon, so it didn't need to be smeared with chicken blood. He was about to go out with Xianxia and the others to search for traces of the zombie when Li Qing suddenly said, Li Mu, stay here. Under Hanja's strange gaze, Li Mu came back and asked, Boss, do you need me to do anything? Li Qing, you stay here and watch over Landlord Zhang's direct relatives. Don't let them run around. If the zombie is an ancestor of the Jianghu family, then it will definitely come back. Got it? Li Mu nodded and asked, do you want to prepare some glutinous rice? Li Qing asked, what do you need glutinous rice for? Li Mu was confused. Isn't glutinous rice able to restrain zombies? Hanja snorted and said, don't think that any Jianghu magician knows the real Taoist magic. I've never heard of glutinous rice restraining zombies. It's so easy to believe such nonsense. Miss Qing, I have to discipline this subordinate for you. If this goes on, not only will he get himself killed, but he will also drag his colleagues down. He's my man. You don't have to discipline him. Li Qing said coldly. Then she looked at Li Mu and said, there's no record of glutinous rice restraining zombies in books. Where did you hear it from? A Taoist priest. Li Mu smiled and said, his surname is Lin and he's a Taoist master. His Taoist magic is specialized in restraining zombies and demons. People call him Zombie Taoist Priest or Taoist Ime. I learned a lot about zombies from him. He said that glutinous rice can restrain zombies. When encountering zombies, as long as you hold your breath, you won't be discovered. Li Qing's expression changed slightly. She said, zombies are dead things. They can't see or hear, but they can sense people's location by their breath. That Taoist priest should not be lying since he has such knowledge. There are countless Taoist magic and no one knows all of it. Maybe this is his secret magic. As for whether it works or not, we'll know after trying it. Chapter 51. Li Qing didn't directly deny the use of the glutinous rice. Li Mu borrowed some glutinous rice from the villagers of Jianghu village and sprinkled it around the ancestral hall of the Jianghu family. Regardless of whether the glutinous rice had a restraining effect on zombies, there was no harm in making an extra layer of preparation. The villagers of Jianghu village dispersed, and Landlord Zhang's direct blood relatives were arranged to stay in the ancestral hall. Although zombies didn't have intelligence and didn't pick humans or animals for blood, the blood essence of direct blood relatives could accelerate their evolution. If the one who killed Landlord Zhang was the ancestor of the Jianghu family, as long as the bloodline of the Jianghu family still existed, it would definitely come back. This was their instinct, so Li Mu and the others only needed to wait in Jianghu village. However, after the villagers of Jianghu village who went to check on the Jianghu family's graveyard returned, Hanja began to doubt his earlier speculation. According to the villagers, there was nothing unusual in the graveyard of the Jianghu family's ancestor, which meant that none of them had become zombies. Landlord Zhang's death might just be a coincidence. If that was the case, it wouldn't be so easy to find traces of the zombie. Li Mu thought of the disappearance of Landlord Zhang's father's body and asked doubtfully, could it really be the older Landlord Zhang? Under normal circumstances, this is impossible. Li Qing denied Li Mu's guess and said, a corpse needs a certain opportunity to become a zombie. First of all, Landlord Zhang's father's graveyard must be a place to raise corpses. Only then could it be possible for him to become a zombie. Secondly, even if he became a zombie, it would be the lowest level of white zombie. It would take at least 20 years to evolve into a jumping zombie, and the one who killed Landlord Jiang was obviously a jumping zombie. Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, under normal circumstances this is the case. What about abnormal circumstances? Li Qing said, corpses that have just died not long ago can absorb a large amount of yin energy in a very short period of time and accelerate the evolution process. Perhaps someone has refined the corpses and forcibly helped them evolve. Or perhaps Landlord Jiang's father was bitten to death by the flying stiff, but according to the Yaman's investigation he died of illness. Obviously, if he wanted to know the origin of the zombie that killed Landlord Jiang, he just had to see if it would come here tonight. If nothing unexpected happened, Li Mu wouldn't be able to go home tonight. For the past 2 days he didn't have time to go back and tell Wanwan. Li Mu felt guilty for taking Lu Hanyan's monthly food allowance. Zhang Shan, Li Si, and the others returned to Jiang village before dark. They searched the cemeteries and mass graves near Jiang village, but they didn't find anything. Hanja's face was filled with doubt as he muttered, that's strange. That zombie couldn't have flown over. That's impossible. If it was a flying zombie, the North County would have already been in chaos. Li Mu learned from the Encyclopedia of Monsters in the 10 Continents that the strength of a jumping stiff was about the same as a cultivator in the assembled spirit realm. Because they were like ghosts but not ghosts, and like demons but not demons, many spells that targeted demons and ghosts were ineffective against them. This made the jumping stiff more difficult to deal with than evil ghosts and shape-shifting demons. However, no matter how difficult it was to deal with, no matter how strong the jumping stiff was, it didn't have any intelligence. Some relied on their instincts and their bodies were stiff. They could only jump and walk. However, a flying stiff was different. Once a zombie evolved into a flying stiff, it could pose a threat to cultivators in the middle realm. Not only would it have basic intelligence, but it could also jump and move like a normal person. It could also suck a person's blood essence and soul without leaving any external injuries. It was said that a flying stiff appeared in the neighboring Zhou County a few days ago. Even the county governor was alarmed. The chaos it caused had yet to subside. That flying stiff had countless eyes on it. It couldn't have run from Zhou County to here. Below the flying stiff, Li Qing and Hanja were here, so it couldn't cause too much trouble. The sky gradually darkened. Zhang Shan, Li Si, and the other 4 constables held weapons smeared with rune blood and stood guard around the ancestral hall. Li Mu sat in the ancestral hall with Bai in his arms, looking at the few direct descendants of the Zhang clan. Li Qing wasn't here. Although the zombie didn't have the 7 spirits, its body was extremely strong and its senses were even sharper. Li Qing was already in the assembled spirit realm. If she stayed here, the zombie might not dare to appear out of fear. Li Mu didn't know if the zombie would come. As he waited, he silently recited the Heart Sutra to cultivate. Unknowingly, it was already past the 4th hour. The Cho hour had passed. In other words, it was already past 3 in the morning. In the ancestral hall, the few direct descendants of the Zhang clan had already fallen asleep. Only 2 people were still awake. They leaned against the pillars of the ancestral hall, drowsy. Bang, bang, bang. Just as Li Mu was about to fall asleep, there was suddenly a hurried knock on the door of the ancestral hall. Li Mu was jolted awake. He pulled out the Bai sword and walked to the courtyard outside the ancestral hall. He asked loudly, "Who is it?" "It's me. Open the door." Zhang Shan's voice came from outside the door. Li Mu heaved a sigh of relief. He walked over and opened the door. Looking at Zhang Shan outside, he asked, "What's wrong? Did you find anything?" "I've been waiting for half the night, but I didn't find anything." Zhang Shan covered his buttocks and said anxiously, "I think I ate something bad today. Where's the outhouse? I can't hold it in any longer." Li Mu pointed to a corner in the courtyard. Zhang Shan covered his buttocks and immediately ran over. Li Mu closed the door. Before he reached the ancestral hall, there was another knock on the door. Bang, bang, bang. This time the knocking was even more hurried than the previous one. Li Mu was about to walk over when the 2 sturdy wooden doors collapsed with 2 muffled thuds. A tall, dark figure appeared at the door. The moonlight shone on the figure, revealing a pale face without a trace of blood. The face was full of wrinkles and the eyes were sunken deep into their sockets. 2 fangs protruded from the corners of his mouth. He stood at the door and a gust of yin qi came from afar. "It's here." Li Mu was shocked. He immediately took out a bamboo tube from his bosom and lit it without hesitation. A flame shot out from the bamboo tube and exploded in the night sky. Roar! The zombie made a muffled sound from its throat and pounced at Li Mu. His knees did not bend, but it was extremely fast. It almost left an afterimage. The inch-long nails on its 10 fingers emitted a faint cold light as it stabbed at Li Mu's neck. So fast. Li Mu was shocked. He knew that although jumping zombies were not agile, their speed was much faster than ordinary people. However, he did not expect them to be so fast. Fortunately, he was prepared. He immediately used the leaping rock technique and jumped back several feet, dodging the zombie's attack. Sizzle. The zombie jumped to the ground, but a burst of black smoke suddenly rose from its feet. Its face revealed a hideous and painful expression. It instantly jumped back and did not dare to take another step forward. Li Mu looked at the layer of glutinous rice on the ground and discovered that there was a charred footprint on it. He heaved a sigh of relief and said in his heart, "Praise Uncle Ing." Xianxia came out of the outhouse in the corner of the ancestral hall and asked in confusion, "Li Mu, what's burnt? Oh my God, what is that?" Seeing the black figure at the door, Xianxia's body trembled. He was so scared that his legs went soft and he fell to the ground. Sensing Xianxia's aura, the black figure turned around and pounced on Xianxia. There was no glutinous rice scattered around the outhouse. Li Mu looked at Xianxia and shouted from afar, "Hold your breath." Xianxia suddenly pinched his nose. The zombie's figure paused and stood in place. Its movements immediately slowed down. Seeing this scene, Li Mu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The zombie could not see Xianxia in front of it, which meant that it could not see anything. At most, it was just a powerful jumping zombie. Li Qing and Hanja could easily deal with it. He reached into the cloth bag in his arms and took out a handful of glutinous rice. He sprinkled it on the zombie's body. Although the zombie couldn't see, it instinctively sensed danger and jumped away. The moment it landed on the ground, a talisman shot from the front and stuck to its forehead. His body froze on the spot, unable to move at all. Hanja's figure walked out from the darkness. He looked at the zombie with disdain and said, "It's just a jumping zombie. It's neither a demon nor a ghost. What can it do? Be careful." Li Mu pushed his spiritual power to the extreme and almost instantly appeared beside Hanja. He kicked him away, making the 10 sharp nails that stabbed at Hanja's neck miss. The fulu on the zombie's forehead spontaneously combusted and turned into ashes. After the attack aimed at Hanja missed, it changed the direction of its 10 fingers and stabbed at Li Mu's chest. Bang! His attack still didn't hit. Not only that, but after his attack missed, his entire body was sent flying. Li Qing pushed the zombie back with a palm. She stood in front of Li Mu and said, "Leave it to me. You go and protect the Jiang family. Boss, be careful." Li Mu warned her and quickly retreated to the ancestral hall's door in case the zombie suddenly attacked. After being knocked down by Li Qing, the zombie stood up in the air again. However, this time, it just stood there in the distance and was not in a hurry to attack. Although it did not have intelligence, it could feel that the woman who had just pushed it back was very powerful. Suddenly, the zombie's body rose into the air again. However, it did not attack Li Qing. Instead, it quickly retreated. After a few leaps, it disappeared into the boundless night. Chapter 52. It ran away? Li Mu didn't expect the zombie to be so cowardly. After being repelled by Li Qing, it decisively retreated and disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Hanja, you stay here. I'll go after it." If the zombie was allowed to escape, it would definitely harm people again. Li Qing warned Hanja and chased in the direction the zombie disappeared. Hanja had just been kicked away by Li Mu. At this moment, he crawled up from the ground with a complicated expression. He glanced at Li Mu and said, "Glutinous rice really does have a restraining effect on zombies. I was ignorant and inexperienced in the past and my skills were not good enough." Li Mu put away his sword and said, "I'll go see if anyone is injured." Li Mu walked out of the ancestral hall and found that Li Si and the other constables were still in their original positions. It seemed that the zombie was very persistent in its target and was bent on sucking the blood essence of its own people. He gathered everyone and went back to the ancestral hall's courtyard. He used glutinous rice to form a circle outside. Hanja looked at Li Mu again and said, "Thank you for what you did just now." "You're welcome." Li Mu didn't care and said, "If it was someone else, I would have saved them too." Hanja didn't say anything else, but a young man ran out of the ancestral hall and said in horror, "It's Grandpa. The zombie just now was Grandpa." Hanja frowned and asked, "That zombie was the older landlord Jiang. Are you sure you didn't get it wrong?" The young man trembled and said, "I can't be wrong. It's really Grandpa. How is this possible?" Hanja looked doubtful and muttered, "Older landlord Jiang died not long ago. How could he become a jumping corpse? There must be a problem." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a sense of danger and looked at the door. Almost at the same time, Li Mu also looked in the same direction. He saw a black shadow appear in front of the ancestral hall's courtyard again. The old landlord Jiang turned into a zombie and returned, but Li Qing didn't follow him. One of the constables panicked and shouted, "It's back! That thing is back!" Hanja didn't expect the zombie to know how to lure the tiger away from the mountain. His face became even gloomier. He quickly said to the constables, "Go back to the ancestral hall and close the door. Don't come out if you hear anything." Several bailiffs dragged the young man back to the ancestral hall. Only Li Mu, Hanja, and the zombie were left in the courtyard. After being burned by the glutinous rice, the zombie didn't immediately charge forward. It let out a low growl and suddenly spat out a cloud of black fog. The black fog spread in the direction of Hanja and Li Mu. The two of them didn't dare to delay and jumped back to the entrance of the ancestral hall. The black fog didn't spread over. It only swept across the ground of the courtyard. When the glutinous rice on the ground came into contact with the black fog, it instantly turned black. Not good. Just as Hanja spoke, the zombie roared again and pounced. Without the restraint of the glutinous rice, he could set foot in any place in the courtyard. His first target was Li Mu. His 10 fingers carried a cold light as he stabbed at Li Mu. His sharp nails were his weapon. As long as Li Mu was pierced by him, there would be 10 more bloody holes on his body. With Hanja around, Li Mu couldn't use his lightning technique. Of course, the zombie was extremely fast. Even if Li Mu used his lightning technique, he might not be able to hit it. Instead, he would be able to close in on him due to the pause in his casting. Fortunately, Li Mu was already very proficient in the light body movement technique. Although the zombie was fast, its agility was lacking. Li Mu dodged left and right with ease. What made him depressed was that he and Hanja were the only two people in the courtyard. However, even when the zombie passed by Hanja, it was indifferent. It was determined to attack him as if it had identified Li Mu as its target. Suddenly, Li Mu thought of a possibility. Li Qing said that he had a pure yang body. His soul and blood essence were great nourishment for evil spirits. Could it be that the zombie could sense the difference in his body? Li Mu, get out of the way. Hanja's voice sounded in his ears. Li Mu rolled on the ground and circled behind a pillar in the corridor. Hanja held the wooden sword in one hand and stabbed it into the zombie's body from the front. Peachwood was the essence of the 5 wood. It had the effect of warding off evil spirits and disaster relief. The peachwood sword in Hanja's hand was a magic tool that had been refined. The zombie had a head of copper and arms of iron. Its body was hard to be injured by blades and swords, but it was still pierced by the wooden sword. It let out a painful roar. With this roar, more black chi gushed out of its mouth and wrapped around the peachwood sword in its chest. He held the sword with both hands and actually pulled it out directly. With a kacha sound, it broke into 2 pieces. Bang! The zombie swept its arms. Hanja raised his arms to block, but his body was sent flying. Brr. After being injured, the zombie seemed to be even more ferocious. It roared a few times at the sky. Several rays of white moonlight were sucked into its mouth. Its body swelled up and its fangs protruded from the corners of its mouth. Its fingernails turned purple and grew an inch longer than before. After this series of changes happened to his body, at a certain moment, his body disappeared from where he stood. Li Mu's heart beat wildly. A strong sense of danger rose in his heart. He subconsciously used the light body technique and moved 3 feet to the side. He felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. Blood seeped out from under his uniform. At the same time, the zombie appeared where he had been standing. Drops of blood slowly dripped from its purple fingernails. Li Mu clutched his shoulder. He felt dizzy. In the next moment, the zombie disappeared from Li Mu's sight again. Bang! A figure was sent flying. The zombie was stopped by Hanja for a moment, and its figure reappeared. Hanja crawled up from the ground, holding a broken sword in his hand. He then took out an 8 trigrams mirror from his bosom and aimed it at the zombie. A beam of light shot out from the mirror, forcing the zombie to retreat temporarily. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked back at Li Mu. He asked, "Are you okay?" Li Mu mobilized the Buddhist mana in his body and channeled it to the wound on his shoulder. The originally greenish-black wound emitted wisps of black gas and stopped bleeding. Li Mu's dizziness also gradually disappeared. He held by and shook his head. "I'm fine." Hanja forced himself to stand up. He said, "This bastard's cultivation is higher than I thought. Get out of the way." Li Mu looked at him. Obviously, he was an arrow at the end of its flight. He asked, "Can you do it?" Hanja twitched the corner of his mouth. He did not speak again. He threw down the broken sword and slowly walked to the corridor. The zombie was obviously afraid of the 8 trigrams mirror in Hanja's hand. It took 2 steps back and did not attack immediately. Hanja stood in the courtyard. He crossed his fingers and suddenly made a gesture. Taoist hand seal. Li Mu was shocked. At the same time he sensed that the power of heaven and earth around him suddenly changed. Brr. The zombie seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. It roared and pounced at Hanja. However, when his body was in midair he was sent flying back. A faint shadow appeared in front of Hanja. It was the shadow of an old man. He had white hair and a white beard. He wore a loose Taoist robe. He looked at the zombie indifferently. He stretched out a hand. His index finger and middle finger were straightened. His thumb pressed against the ring finger and little finger. He made a sword gesture. He waved his hand gently and the shadow gradually disappeared. Everything happened in a short period of time. From the appearance of the old man to his disappearance, there seemed to be no change. However, the zombie stood in the same place, motionless. Puff. After a soft sound, its body split into 2 halves and fell to the ground. Hanja's face was pale. He took out 2 pieces of fulu and threw them at the 2 halves of the corpse. The fulu spontaneously combusted in the air. When it came into contact with the corpse, it burned fiercely. Soon, the 2 halves of the corpse on the ground were burned to ashes. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief. The dizziness hit him again. His body swayed and fell to the ground. A figure came from afar. Li Mu did not fall to the ground. Instead, he fell into Li Qing's arms. Boss. Li Mu struggled to get up. Li Qing frowned and said, "Don't move. You've been poisoned. I'll help you heal first." She held Li Mu's hand and continuously transferred her magic power to him. Hanja stood there. He lowered his head and looked at his arm that was accidentally scratched. He walked to the side and silently circulated his magic power to heal it. Chapter 53. The villagers of the Jiang family village were finally relieved that the zombies that plagued the village had been killed. I didn't expect it to really be the older landlord Jiang. Those were the descendants of the Jiang family. How could he eat them? Didn't you hear the Immortal Master say that the older landlord Jiang has become a zombie? He's inhumane and doesn't care about the descendants. I remember that when landlord Jiang was young, he also studied Taoist magic in the temple for a while. The Taoist priest even said that he had a good aptitude and that he couldn't even defeat a zombie. I think the monk is more powerful. I heard that the Buddha of Jinshan Temple appeared again the night before yesterday. After dawn, the villagers of the Jiang family village gathered around the ancestral hall of the Jiang family, pointing and discussing. Many people didn't sleep the whole night after such a thing happened in the village. As soon as dawn broke, they gathered their courage and came to the ancestral hall of the Jiang family to inquire about it. Hanja, who had gone to check the tomb of the older landlord Jiang, had already returned. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he couldn't help but curse. The Jiang family didn't find a reliable feng shui master when they chose the tomb. They said that it was a good place to bury the dead. Who knows how much evil spirit and resentment have accumulated over thousands of years. No wonder he turned into a zombie as soon as he was buried and evolved into a jumping zombie in such a short time. The only suspicious point about the zombie incident in the Jiang family village was that the older landlord Jiang had turned into a zombie not long after his death. Moreover, his cultivation was so high that Hanja and Li Mu were almost killed by him. After Hanja carefully checked the tomb, he finally found the answer. Not only was the place where Squire Jiang had been buried not a place with good feng shui, but it was also a cave of great evil. Large amounts of baleful yin energy had gathered underground, and the corpses buried there would transform within a few days. After absorbing the baleful yin energy, their strength would explode for a short period of time. Coupled with the fact that they had absorbed the blood of their kin, they would have the terrifying cultivation base of a zombie. At this point, there were no more doubts about landlord Jiang's death, and the case could be closed. The Jiang family could be said to be extremely unlucky. The old official had just died, and a month later, a new official had died. They even encountered such an evil thing. For the county government and Jiang family village, it was already considered lucky that the situation did not continue to escalate. Li Mu was injured by the zombie yesterday, so his face was still pale. He lamented, "That zombie has only cultivated for less than a month, and it already has such a high level of attainment. It's comparable to dozens of years of cultivation for monsters and humans. It really doesn't make sense. This isn't the only unreasonable thing in the cultivation world. This is nothing." Hanja pursed his lips and said, "This beast has absorbed so much baleful yin qi, but it's only equivalent to the third realm of cultivation. There was once a person who was full of resentment before he died and turned into a malicious spirit after his death. His strength was close to the sixth realm and he wreaked havoc in the world. Countless cultivators died at his hands. That time, the imperial court sent out powerful cultivators of the upper three realms to completely kill him. The source of power of ghosts was different from that of cultivators. Li Mu could not be envious and there was no need for him to be envious. The case of Jianghu family village ended. Hanja left 2 constables to clean up the mess and pacify the people. The rest returned to the county government. In the guard room, Li Qing once again sent a stream of mana to Li Mu and said, "You're injured. Go home and rest. Don't worry about the yamen for now." Li Mu nodded. He had not rested for 2 days. Even though he had already started cultivating, his body still could not take it. He walked out of the guard room and prepared to go home. Old Wang poked his head out of the guard room next door and said, "Li Mu, you haven't been here for 2 days. This morning when the yamen just opened, a girl came to the county government to look for you." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "Girl? Which girl?" Old Wang thought for a moment and said, "I can't remember her name. But that girl was very beautiful. She had a good figure." In front of her, Miss Qing was like a child. Hearing Old Wang say this, Li Mu knew who came. Lu Hanyin came to the yamen to look for him this morning. Did she run into some kind of trouble? Li Mu walked all the way home. He planned to change his clothes first and then go next door to ask. He had just taken out his key when the door to the courtyard next door suddenly opened. Lu Hanyin walked out quickly. When she saw Li Mu, she sighed in relief and asked, "Where have you been these 2 days?" 2 cases happened in the yamen. I went out to investigate. Li Mu explained and asked again, "They said you went to the yamen to look for me. What happened?" Lu Hanyin rolled her eyes at him and said, "It was Wan who was worried about you. She asked me to go to the county yamen to ask." As she spoke, she saw the blood on Li Mu's shoulder. She quickly walked up and asked with a worried face, "Are you hurt?" Li Mu didn't have time to change his clothes and was ready to go back to treat the wound. He shook his head and said, "It's just a small wound." Lu Hanyin saw that the clothes on his shoulder were torn into strips of cloth and she could vaguely see a few horrible wounds. Her face was slightly pale and she asked, "How did you get hurt?" Li Mu was afraid that he would scare her by saying that it was a zombie scratch. He smiled and said, "It's nothing serious. I'll go back and change my clothes first." Li Mu returned home and took off his clothes. Li Qing only helped him get rid of the corpse poison. The wound on his shoulder was still there. It looked a little hideous and horrible, which made Li Mu feel a chill in his heart. The zombie's nails were really sharp. If there was a slight deviation last night, his whole arm would have been cut off. Li Mu was about to treat the wound when 2 exclamations suddenly came from the door. Wan was so scared that she covered her eyes. Lu Hanyin first turned around and then immediately turned back. Seeing the 5 wounds on Li Mu's shoulder, she hurriedly said, "Doctor, come in." Seeing a doctor with a medicine box come in, Li Mu knew that she had just called a doctor for him. The old man took a few steps forward and looked at Li Mu's shoulder in astonishment. He asked, "Hiss, it seems like he was scratched by something but it doesn't look like a beast. Lady Lu, I'll make some medicine for him first. Please help him clean the wound first." Lu Hanyin looked at the little maidservant who was about to cry with a pale face and said, Wan, go and get some hot water." Wan quickly ran out and soon came in with a basin of hot water. Lu Hanyin wet the towel and sat in front of the bed. Li Mu quickly said, "I'll do it myself. I can do it." Although he only exposed his shoulder at the moment, he must take off his shirt to clean the wound. Men and women should be careful. At that time she would still be here, so it would be inappropriate. Seeing that Li Mu's other hand was not injured, Lu Hanyin handed him the towel and said, Wan, let's go out first." She walked out of the room and saw 2 figures, one fat and one thin, coming in from outside. Lu Hanyin had seen one of them and knew that he was also a bailiff of the county government. His surname seemed to be Zhang. Although she had never seen the other tall and thin one, looking at his official uniform, he should be another colleague. Li Si's eyes swept over Lu Hanyin and no longer looked at her. Zhang Shan smiled and said warmly, "Lady Lu, you're also here. You're here to see Li Mu, right? The doctor is applying medicine for him inside." Lu Hanyin nodded slightly to the 2 of them. She changed her mind and asked, "What case did he investigate these 2 days? How did he get so seriously injured?" Li Si did not answer, but Zhang Shan seemed to have opened up a chatterbox. He said with joy, "This case is a bit complicated. The chickens and sheep in Jianghu village were sucked of blood. At first we thought it was just 2 yellow-skinned elites, but who would have thought that there was a zombie? Last night we fought with the zombie for 300 rounds. Li Mu was scratched by the zombie. Lu Hanyin looked at them in a daze and murmured, "Demon, zombie?" Xianxia nodded and said, "In fact there was a tiger demon before, but it was killed by a monk. By the way, has the doctor finished applying medicine?" "I'll go in and see." Li Si kicked him in the leg and said, "What are you looking at?" The boss said to let Li Mu have a good rest and not disturb him. "You didn't go back last night? Why don't you go back and tell your wife?" Zhang Shan's expression changed when he heard this. He put down the fruit in his hand and immediately said, "I'll go back first. I'll come to see Li Mu later. Lady Lu, please help us take these things in." Chapter 54. The doctor helped Li Mu apply the medicine and simply bandaged his shoulder. Then he packed up and left. After a while, Lu Hanyin and Wan walked into the room. He looked at Li Mu and moved his lips as if he wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Li Mu leaned against the headboard and said, "I'll give you the doctor's fee and medicine later." Lu Hanyin shook her head and said, "You're now the storyteller of the tea house. Many customers come here because of you. The tea house depends on you to make money. We can still afford to pay for the doctor's fee and medicine." Since she said so, Li Mu didn't insist. Wan trotted to the bed and looked at Li Mu with admiration. She asked, "Young master, did you really go to catch a monster?" Li Mu had just heard Zhang Shan's voice coming from outside. Presumably, the talkative Zhang Shan must have told him everything. He might even add a few more details. He smiled and said, "We didn't catch the monster, but we were almost caught by the monster." Wan squatted in front of the bed and said, "Miss has been worried about you these 2 days?" Lu Hanyin glanced at her. "Who's worried? Who's been lying on the wall watching you these 2 days?" Li Mu looked up at Lu Hanyin and said, "I'm sorry. The cases in the yamen come and go all the time. I can't go home most of the time. I've made you worry." Lu Hanyin finally couldn't help but say, "It's so dangerous to be a constable, and your body? Can't you just quit being a constable? Whether it's writing or telling stories, you'll be safe. If you go on like this, you'll lose your life sooner or later." Although she knew that demons and ghosts existed in this world, it was only hearsay. She always thought that demons and zombies were things that were very far away from her. Until she met Li Mu could hear Lu Hanyin's concern. After the misunderstanding was resolved, the two of them were not only neighbors but also friends. Her words were completely for Li Mu's sake. However, for Li Mu, being a constable could help him condense his soul. He wouldn't give it up no matter what. Moreover, there was still Li Qing in the yamen. Without her help, Li Mu probably only had less than half a year left to live. Lu Hanyin was only a normal person. The details of cultivation couldn't be explained to her. Li Mu didn't want to explain either. He only smiled and said, "Life is important, but if even a constable is so afraid of death, who will protect your safety and the safety of the common people?" He looked at Lu Hanyin and said seriously, "It's precisely because life is important that it can't be wasted. A person's life should be spent like this. When he looks back on the past, he shouldn't feel regret for wasting his time, nor should he feel shame for doing nothing. Even if I only have half a year left to live, in this half a year, I will do what I want to do, what I should do." A moment later, Lu Hanyin and Wan walked out of Li Mu's room. Wan turned her head and asked in confusion, "Miss, what does the young master mean?" Lu Hanyin was silent for a long time before she sighed and said softly, "You're still young. It's fine if you don't understand, but you have to know that there are many demons and ghosts in this world. The reason why we can live peacefully here is because there are people like him, silently protecting us in the dark." Wan nodded as if she understood and said, "I understand. The young master is secretly protecting us. He's injured now. Miss, can I stay and take care of him?" Lu Hanyin nodded and said, "I'll go boil some nourishing soup. Bring it to him in a moment." This wasn't the first time that Li Mu had seen Lu Hanyin's cooking skills, but when Wan fed Li Mu spoonful after spoonful of chicken soup, Li Mu couldn't help but have the impulse to marry Lu Hanyin. This way he could drink this delicious soup every day. Wan moved a small stool and sat in front of the bed. She put the spoon to Li Mu's mouth and said, "Open your mouth." Ah! Li Mu opened his mouth and she slowly fed the soup to Li Mu. Li Mu originally wanted to drink it himself, but his right shoulder was injured. After applying medicine and bandaging, his entire arm couldn't move. Wan saw that it was inconvenient for him to drink the soup with his left hand, so she picked up the bowl and fed him. Ever since Li Mu was weaned, he hadn't been served like this. The little maid was really considerate. He didn't dote on her for nothing these days. Wan fed Li Mu soup and asked curiously, "Young master, can a tiger spirit talk? What do zombies look like? The books say that zombies can suck human blood and jump when they walk. Is it true?" Li Mu said leisurely, "They can talk. Not only can they talk but they can also turn into humans. Zombies can suck the blood of humans, cows and sheep. They don't just jump when they walk. The powerful zombies can not only walk like humans but can also fly. When Li Qing walked into the room she saw Li Mu lazily leaning against the bed. A pretty little maid was feeding him soup spoonful by spoonful. "Boss." Li Mu almost choked. When he was about to stand up, Li Qing waved her hand and said, "Sit down. I came to see you and give you a piece of fulu. Later you can turn it into talisman water and drink it. After you recover there won't be any scars left on your body." Li Mu took the fulu from Li Qing and said, "Thank you, boss." Li Qing added, "You can rest at ease and recuperate first. You don't have to go to the government office for the time being. Lord Jiang has already reported that glutinous rice can restrain zombies. It should be of help to the cultivators in Zhou County. When the disaster there is over, the county governor may reward you." Li Mu nodded and asked, "What about Huang Shu and his wife?" Li Qing said, "The Jianghu County magistrates asked people to exchange some medicinal herbs for silver to compensate the villagers. The 2 demons were also released back to the mountain." With the 2 cases over, Li Mu had nothing to worry about. Suddenly he remembered something and asked, "Boss, the magic that Constable Han used to kill the zombie was a Taoist magic art, right?" "Not exactly." Li Qing thought for a while and explained, "In the Fulu school, his branch once had a strong cultivator of the upper realm. Although he didn't create his own Taoist magic art, he left behind a magic art that was close to Taoist magic art for his descendants. When using this magic art, one could summon his doppelganger and control this doppelganger to use a magic art. When Han Zhi, who was in the soul condensing realm, used this magic art, he could summon a doppelganger of the supernatural realm. The biggest difference between human cultivators and demons was that there was an endless supply of magic arts. Han Zhi was only in the 2nd realm, but he could kill a zombie that was infinitely close to the 4th realm. Dealing with Lin Wan, who was also in the 2nd realm, was as easy as blowing off dust. Although Li Mu could also use the thunder magic with his soul-refining realm cultivation, it was not as convenient as Han Zhi's. He could summon a doppelganger and stand aside to watch the show. He still had to spend a lot of time practicing the technique of striking people. When his thunder magic could hit where it was directed, predict the enemy's position, and accurately hit a moving enemy, only then would it be considered a small success. Li Qing's gaze swept past Wan Wan and she said to Li Mu, "You rest first. There are still some suspicious points in the case of Zhang family village that need to be investigated. I'll go back to the Yamen first and come see you in 2 days." Li Mu sharply sensed Li Qing's gaze and explained, "Wan Wan is my neighbor. She specially came over to take care of me." Before Li Qing left, the trusting look in her eyes made Li Mu feel very touched. This showed that as his superior she still understood Li Mu. She knew that he was different from Li Si. He was a true gentleman and would not deceive an ignorant girl's feelings and body. Li Mu picked up the paper talisman and said, "Wan Wan, please bring me a bowl of water." The fulu that Li Qing gave him took effect very quickly. The wound on Li Mu's shoulder healed at an unimaginable speed. In just 3 days, the wound on his shoulder had already formed a scab, and there was only a slight inconvenience in his movements. These 3 days were the most comfortable days Li Mu had had since he came to this world. Under Wan Wan's care, his clothes and food were all provided to him. Other than going to the toilet, there was someone to do everything for him. Li Mu finally understood why rich families always kept a few servant girls. This kind of life was simply a land of warmth and gentleness. However, a land of warmth and gentleness was also a hero's grave. Li Mu understood this principle. After enjoying the life of a young master for 3 days, he once again went to the tea house of Yunyan Pavilion. In the private room, Lu Hanyan looked at him and advised, "You should rest for a few more days. It won't be too late to come back after your injuries have healed." "No need." Li Mu shook his head and said, "As a storyteller, the people who like me are my parents. I can't let them wait for too long." Lu Hanyan saw that his complexion was good and did not insist. She only looked at Li Mu with a strange expression and asked, "Then do you mind letting your parents know where you live? Many of them want to personally come and give you gifts. Please don't." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "You know, I'm a low-key person. I only want to live a quiet life and don't want to be disturbed by too many people." Chapter 55. Yunyan Pavilion Tea House. After the rooster crowed, the old man still didn't dare to go back. It wasn't until noon, when the sun was high in the sky, that he walked back nervously. However, when he returned to Clearwater Bay, he saw an unbelievable scene. He saw the 2 water ghosts, the young man who passed by that day, and the Taoist priest working together to steal all his grapes. After a few days, the young storyteller finally returned. Everyone heard the ending of the story of the water ghost and the old man as they wished. Although many people were shocked by the sudden turn of events and slammed the table in anger, they had no choice but to admit that this unheard-of plot was much more exciting than listening to other storytellers. This young storyteller would tell 3 to 5 stories a day. When he reached the last story, in order to keep the guests, he would purposely stop at the most exciting part. Although everyone was angry, they knew that this was the storyteller's way of keeping the guests. At most, they would curse a few words, but they wouldn't rush up the stage to beat the storyteller up. In Yuntai County there was a county magistrate named Li. His family was very rich and raised 7 beautiful concubines. His treasures were piled up like a mountain. One day, County Magistrate Li suddenly died. A Taoist priest came to his house and said that he could bring him back to life. The Taoist priest gave County Magistrate Li's old servant a paper bag and warned him to look at it only when the situation was critical. After that, the Taoist priest disappeared. When the old servant returned home, he couldn't help but open the paper bag and secretly look at its contents. What was written on the paper was, "If you want to know what was written on the paper, tomorrow at the same time. Be there or be square." The gripping story, the familiar, "If you want to know what will happen in the future, wait for the next episode." The guests below the stage angrily shouted a few times, "Bastard! This again! I'll break your legs!" and so on. Then they scattered while cursing. Li Mu slipped out of Yunyan Pavilion through the back door. He estimated that at this speed, he would be able to gather all the anger he needed to condense the second soul in 10 days and half a month. If he had enough courage to refine the anger, he would be able to refine the second soul immediately. He did not know if the tiger demon was bold enough. If it was not, he would have to find other opportunities. Old Wang's theory of survival of the fittest was cruel, but it was a realistic law of survival. Li Mu would not kill demons and take their souls for the sake of cultivation, but if the evil demons were executed on the spot, he would not waste his courage. It was not that there were no shortcuts on the road of cultivation, but one had to stick to one's heart and bottom line. Li Mu was always using Li Qing's words to ask himself. He went to the duty room and saw Zhang Shan, Li Si and Old Wang eating watermelon around the table. Zhang Shan looked up and asked in surprise, "Li Mu, why did you come to the yamen instead of recuperating?" Li Mu picked up a slice of watermelon and said, "The boss gave me a fulu for treatment. I'm almost healed." Zhang Shan shook his head and said, "You've just recovered and you're already here. You're really getting more and more diligent." Old Wang asked Li Mu while eating the watermelon, "Where did you learn that glutinous rice can restrain zombies?" "I've looked through hundreds of books but I couldn't find any record of it." Li Mu said, "A Taoist priest told me when I was young. It might be his secret method." "It's also possible." Old Wang threw away the watermelon peel and said, "You have to write this down in the Encyclopedia of Monsters in the 10 Continents. Later on, when people encounter zombies, they will have one more way to defend themselves." He wiped his mouth and asked, "By the way, did you take the zombies' courage?" Li Mu was stunned for a moment and asked, "Zombies also have courage?" "Zombies have been dead for so long that their spirits have long been scattered." "Of course not." Old Wang shook his head and said, "But you don't think that zombies only suck human blood when they harm people, do you?" Old Wang read a lot of books and his knowledge was much broader than Li Mu's. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What else?" Old Wang picked up another slice of watermelon and said, "White zombies and black zombies only suck human blood. They just became zombies not long ago and can only suck human blood. But jumping zombies are different. Not only can they absorb the moonlight to cultivate, but they can also absorb the human spirit when they suck blood. A jumping zombie with decades of cultivation has accumulated a lot of people's courage in its body. It's much more useful than monsters," Li Mu said regretfully. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Old Wang shrugged. "You didn't ask earlier." Li Mu really didn't know this. If he had known earlier, he would have asked Hanja to burn the zombie later. But on second thought, old landlord Jiang was different from those jumping zombies with decades of cultivation. He had died less than half a month ago and had only bitten 1 person and 2 sheep. There shouldn't be much courage left in his body. Thinking of this, he didn't feel so regretful. It's not too late to know now. Old Wang finished the watermelon quickly and said, "The zombie disaster in Zhou County hasn't been solved yet. If you go to Zhou County now, you should be able to absorb a lot of courage. Many cultivators in Beijun have gone to Zhou County. In addition to helping to quell the zombie disaster, they should also have the same idea." Although the courage of the zombies in Zhou County was very attractive to Li Mu could still weigh his own weight. A jumping zombie almost killed him. Zhou County even had flying zombies. Wasn't it better to follow Li Qing and kill a few evil monsters? There was no need to take such a big risk just to take a shortcut. However, Old Wang reminded him that there was nothing wrong with reading more books. If Li Mu was as knowledgeable as Old Wang, he wouldn't have wasted so many opportunities. He looked at Old Wang and said, "What books have you been reading recently? Recommend a few to me." Old Wang thought for a moment and said, "Picking Flowers, A Curtain of Spring Dreams, Beautiful Empress of 10,000 Demons, and Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. It was just published yesterday. It really opened my eyes. There are people and ghosts, people and demons, people and ghosts and demons, there are female ghosts, snake demons, and even dragons. I have to admit that the person who wrote this book is really a genius." When Zhang Shan heard this, he immediately became spirited and said, "Old Wang, when you finish reading these books, lend them to me." Picking Flowers, Spring Dreams, Beautiful Empress didn't sound like a serious book. How could it be compared with Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio? One was a pure erotic novel, while the other had depth and connotation. It either exposed the darkness of feudal rule, or resisted the shackles of feudal etiquette. Through the love between demons and humans, the author expressed the author's pursuit of ideal love. A serious person would see a breakthrough in feudal etiquette, but an old man like Old Wang would see a life and death friend, a hero and a son-in-law. People who walked different paths couldn't make plans together. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Lend me the Records of Demons in the 10 Continents for 2 days. I'll return it to you after I finish reading it." On the day the first volume of Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio was published, Lu Hanyin told Li Mu that this book used to be a forbidden book in ancient times. But here Li Mu wasn't worried. Firstly, the feudal etiquette here didn't bind people so deeply. Secondly, Li Mu didn't use any of the chapters that might involve political sensitivities. The more explicit descriptions in the original work were also deleted by Li Mu. The Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio that he gave to the bookstore, other than some mysterious stories, the main theme was love. For example, Xiao Qian, Ying Ning, and Lianqing were full of innocent hearts, the true meaning of love and the praise of true love. Every time Wan Wan listened to Li Mu's narration, her eyes would be filled with tears. Wan Wan was Li Mu's first reader. Lu Hanyin wouldn't let him go if he wanted to do something inappropriate in the book and lead the innocent girl astray. Li Mu was still on sick leave. He just came to the county office to see if there was a chance to collect emotions. Since there wasn't, he didn't plan to talk to Old Wang and the others about their life and death friendship. Before leaving, Li Mu said to Old Wang, "Next time if something like this happens again, remember to tell me in advance." Even Li Qing didn't know about the matter of extracting the zombie's courage. Old Wang had lived long enough and was very knowledgeable. He could totally act as his cultivation consultant. Li Mu had to remind him so that he wouldn't always give advice after the fact. After leaving the county office, Li Mu went straight home. He had been recuperating at home for the past few days. Although he had found out about the person Su he asked him to find out, he didn't have the chance to tell her. After returning home, Li Mu first cooked noodles for him and Wan Wan. After lunch, he personally cooked a few dishes and put them in a lunchbox. When he went out and passed by Yunyan Pavilion, he picked up a few novels and left the city in the direction of Clearwater Bay. Chapter 56. At the Bay of Clearwater, in a small house by the water covered by illusion. Suhi glanced at Li Mu and said slowly, "You said you would come to see me when you have time. You haven't come for so long." "I thought you had forgotten me," Li Mu said with some embarrassment. "A few days ago there was a murder case in the county government. I was slightly injured when I was investigating the case. I just barely recovered now." Suhi's eyes were no longer bitter. She asked doubtfully, "Although your cultivation is not high, you know Taoist magic arts. The Buddha's light is also specialized in restraining demons and ghosts. What could hurt you?" "It was a jumping zombie," Li Mu explained. "I haven't fully mastered the thunder method. It's not easy to use it in front of outsiders." He didn't continue the topic. He put the food box on the table and said, "Before I came, I made a few dishes. Have a taste." Suhi suddenly became interested. She floated to the table and said, "I haven't tasted food for 20 years. You are so considerate." Li Mu just felt that it was not good to come empty-handed. But he was poor and had nothing to give her. The only thing he could give was his cooking skills. Although Suhi had the body of evil ghost, her cultivation had reached the middle 3 realms. It was just a matter of a thought for her to condense a body. Even if the condensed body was fundamentally different from a living person's body, most of its functions were the same. Li Mu sat at the table and asked, "How does it taste?" Suhi's eyes flashed and said, Even if you say you are not a constable but a chef in a restaurant, I will believe you. Li Mu smiled and said, if it suits your taste, I will bring more next time. Suhi reached out her hand and said, it's a deal. Li Mu reached out his hand and clapped with her hand. He said, it's a deal. Suhi ate slowly. Li Mu thought of the purpose of his visit and said, I found the person you asked me to inquire about last time. Suhi paused in the middle of picking up the food and asked faintly, is he still in Xianxia County? No. Li Mu shook his head and said, he was only the county magistrate of Xianxia County for half a year before he was transferred to another county. I heard that he was promoted and even married the county magistrate's daughter. Suhi pursed her lips. Amen. Li Mu asked, does Miss Su have a grudge against Chui Ming? Suhi's eyes turned fierce. She gritted her teeth and said, life and death grudge. She did not explain in detail and Li Mu did not ask. He only remembered the name Chui Ming. Suhi had saved his life. If he had the chance to meet her enemy in the future, he would figure out the whole story and think of a way to avenge her. Suhi's expression quickly returned to normal. She glanced at Li Mu and said, you are different from those men. In the future you don't have to call me Miss Su. I'm a few years older than you. It's not too much for you to call me sister, right? Li Mu thought to himself that she was more than a few years older than him. Even if she was in her teens when she died, 20 years had passed and she was now in her 30s. There was a difference in seniority between the two of them. Seeing that Li Mu did not speak, Suhi looked at him. Why are you unwilling? Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, how old were you when you died? Suhi was startled at first, then she said angrily, I will always be 18. Demonic ghosts were different from humans. It seemed that age could not be calculated according to human standards. Li Mu hurriedly said, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? What I meant was, sister, are you full? If not, I'll go catch a fish from the lake and roast it for you. Just catching a fish and roasting it was tasteless. Fortunately, Li Mu had thought it through. He had considered Suhi's taste and prepared some seasonings at the bottom of the food box before he came. Although there was not much variety, it was enough to roast the fish. Suhi finished the food Li Mu brought and ate 2 more roasted fish. Only then did a satisfied expression appear on her face. Li Mu went to a faraway place and began practicing the thunder technique. Suhi knew him inside out. When it came to practicing Dao techniques, Li Mu had no need to avoid her. Moreover, this place was far away from the county. Practicing here would not attract the attention of others. Li Mu could practice without worry. Boom. A bolt of lightning fell from the sky, but it did not hit the ground. Instead it flew towards Suhi. Li Mu was shocked. When he saw Suhi wave her sleeves, he realized that she had taken the initiative to attract the lightning. When the lightning entered Suhi's body, her body only trembled. Then she looked at Li Mu and said, this is indeed not an ordinary lightning. The Dao technique you used is also not an ordinary Dao technique. The scripture you used to save Lin Wan was also a little different. 3 years ago there was a monk who wanted to save me. Their Buddha's light was not as powerful as yours. Li Mu sighed in his heart. His strongest attack could not hurt Suhi at all. The difference in strength between the middle realm and the lower realm was too great. This thunder technique is not ordinary. Wait until you reach the soul condensation realm before you use it. Even I would not dare to take it head on. Suhi flew over and said, wait until you are proficient in this thunder technique. Below the middle realm there will be few who can match you. Try to continue attacking me. With Suhi as his sparring partner, occasionally giving Li Mu some pointers, he became more and more proficient in the use of the confrontation formula. In the beginning he missed every time, but in the end he could already predict and interrupt her attack route. Although he still could not accurately hit her, as long as Li Mu practiced diligently, it was only a matter of time. A moment later, Li Mu's Fa Li was exhausted and he sat on the grass to rest. Suhi lazily laid down beside him and began to flip through the novels that Li Mu brought her. The first few books, after flipping through a few pages, she threw them aside. Those scholars, after 20 years, their routines had not changed at all. Mediocre youngsters who had a fortuitous encounter, slaying demons and eliminating evil for the people. Finally they became famous all over the world, surrounded by beauties and walked to the peak of life. She was already tired of reading these stories 20 years ago. Only this book called Strange Stories from a Strange Story. Every story was short, but it was thought-provoking. In the story, whether it was humans, demons, or ghosts, they were all made of flesh and blood. Unknowingly she was fascinated by it. In those novels on the market, demons and ghosts were almost all evil. They sucked people's blood essence, stole people's souls, and brought disaster to the world. The protagonists in the stories often took it as their duty to slay demons and devils. But in this Strange Stories from a Strange Story, demons and ghosts were no longer evil. They also had human emotions. They were affectionate and righteous, true to their nature. The author of a book would often express their thoughts and views in the book. From this, it could be seen that this person called Pu Songling had a fair heart towards demons and ghosts. Suhi looked at Li Mu and asked, "Is there more at the back?" Li Mu turned his head and said, "Only one volume has been published so far. I don't know when the second volume will be published. Next time I'll give you the manuscript at the back." Suhi was slightly stunned. She looked at him and asked, "You wrote this?" Li Mu said sorry to Pu Songling in his heart. There was no Mr. Strange Stories from a Strange Story in this world. In the eyes of Lu Hanyin and Wan Wan, Li Mu was Pu Songling. There was no need for him to deny it in front of Suhi. Otherwise, when she found out in the future, she might blame him for hiding it. He said casually, "The salary of a bailiff is not high. In my free time, I write novels to earn some royalties to support my family." It was not that Suhi did not believe in Li Mu. She was just surprised that he, as a bailiff, could write such a delicate and touching story. After accepting this fact, she closed the Strange Stories from a Strange Story in her hand and said, "These stories are beautiful, but in reality, there are not so many infatuated men." Li Mu knew that she was prejudiced against men. This kind of view could not be changed in a short time. He could only say, "In this world, there are not many infatuated men, but not all of them are heartless people." Suhi said, "Only someone with a pure heart like you can write such a story." Li Mu said, "Demons and ghosts are not all evil things that bring disaster to the world. I just wrote what I thought in my heart." "What is written in the book is what you think in your heart." "Of course." Suhi nodded and said, "I have one more question." Li Mu asked, "What question?" "Why do the humans in the book always have sex with female ghosts?" Suhi looked into his eyes and asked, "Is this also what you think in your heart?" Chapter 57. Li Mu gave Suhi Strange Stories from a Strange Story because he wanted to change her prejudice against men, not because he wanted her to worry about such a pointless question. He also didn't want her to misunderstand and think that he was hinting at something. Li Mu opened his mouth and said, This is not important." Suhi picked up the book again and said, "Speaking of which, there are not only female ghosts in the book, there are also all kinds of female demons and even dragons. You don't have any weird fetishes, do you?" "Of course not." Li Mu said with a straight face, "I'm not married yet and my primordial yang is still there. How could I have such fetishes? What I want to express is that love has no boundaries. No matter if it's a human, demon, or ghost, they all have the right to pursue love." Suhi said indifferently, "Even if you do, it's nothing. After all, I'm still your sister. Do you want me to catch a female ghost that can only materialize and give it to you next time? I still have things to do at the yamen. Goodbye." After leaving Clearwater Bay, Li Mu let out a long sigh of relief. The first time they met, he knew that Suhi was not easy to deal with. After they got familiar with each other, she drove so fast that Li Mu could not keep up with her. A female ghost with 20 years of cultivation was indeed different from Lin Wan, who had just died. Next time, he should not give her the latter part of Strange Stories from a Strange Story, in case she thought that Li Mu was hinting at something and turned Li Mu into her own kind on a whim. This was not the first time she had such thoughts. Li Mu treated her as a friend, but she always wanted Li Mu's life. Friendship was friendship, but when it was time to guard against her, he still had to guard against her. When he returned to the county and passed by the bookstore, Li Mu glanced at it from afar. Strange Stories from a Strange Story had been officially on sale for 2 days. From the sales, it was not very high, but the bookstore would not lose money. In fact, it would make a small profit. Yunyan Pavilion was just a newly opened bookstore in Yangqiu County. Its influence was limited to Yangqiu County. It only had a limited number of readers and there was competition from other bookstores. It was impossible to achieve financial freedom for a book to become popular. Fortunately, those who could read usually came from well-off families. Every bookstore had a fixed number of customers. The Yunyan Pavilion had just opened, so it was the time to attract customers. Although Strange Stories was also a supernatural novel, its content was all-encompassing. Whether one wanted to read love stories, horror stories, strange stories, or fantasies about female ghosts and demonesses who were lonely at night, one Strange Stories from 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 strange. Limu noticed that there were 20 to 30% more customers in the bookstore than usual. For the follow-up story of Strange Stories from a Strange Story, he planned to split the profits. This way, although he would receive less money in a short period of time, he would still have a steady income. In addition to the music and drama that Lu Hanyin had adapted, as well as the money that he earned from the storytelling in the tea house, although it was impossible to get rich suddenly, it was enough to get him out of poverty. The Yamen was not busy every day. Limu's injury leave was still half a month away. In this half a month he planned to collect enough anger. He had already reminded old Wang that if there was a suitable case in the Yamen, he should get Zhang Shan to inform him. In the next few days, other than going to the tea house to collect anger, Limu spent most of his time cultivating at home. Every time he condensed a soul, his mana would increase tremendously. But the most important thing was still his daily guidance and cultivation. Other than that, he would also spend a certain amount of time every day using his mana to nourish the Bai sword. Although the material of the magical item was important, the improvement in the later stages depended entirely on the owner. An extraordinary magical item, in addition to Limu's army formula, could have an unexpected effect in a battle with demons and ghosts. Just as Limu was cultivating in isolation in Yangqiu County, a novel called Strange Stories from a Strange Story was quietly circulating in the streets. This novel was published by the Yunyan Pavilion. It was different from normal storybooks. Each volume was made up of dozens of stories. These stories were long and short. The short stories were about 100 words, and the long stories were about 1,000 words. The number of words was irregular, and the content was also strange and varied. In the first few days there were only readers who found it novel. But in the next few days the number of people who bought this book suddenly increased, and it attracted the attention of other bookstores. They analyzed this novel seriously, and finally analyzed 2 reasons why this book was so popular. First, it was new. For more than 10 years, stories about demons and ghosts had been popular. The plot had changed again and again, but in the end, it could not escape the 4 words, slay demons and exorcise demons. However, Strange Stories from a Strange Story was different. In this book, demons and ghosts were not all evil creatures that sucked people's blood and souls. Some of them had flesh and blood, and were loyal and righteous. In terms of emotions, they were no different from humans. This novel way of writing attracted many readers. Second, it was broad. This book was a collection of stories and there was no fixed theme. If you wanted to read love stories, there were Xiao Qian and Ying Ning. If you wanted to read humorous jokes, there were Fox Alliance and Ghost Command. If you wanted to read strange stories, there were Corpse Transformation and The Man in the Ear. When the night was lonely and unbearable, the ghostly fox in the book had a different kind of charm. After Sage Time, the principles in the book were thought-provoking. The author of this book was the Taoist priest. His imagination was bold and unconstrained, and it also had deep connotations and discussions about reality. Those who read this book, regardless of gender, old or young, would find their own enjoyment in it. In a certain bookstore, the shopkeeper slapped his head and said regretfully, I misjudged him. In another bookstore, someone hurriedly said, quickly go and find this Pu Songling. See if we can spend a lot of money to get him back. This person is a talent. In the Yunyan Pavilion, shopkeeper Huang was beaming with joy. He looked at Lu Hanyan and said, Miss, your eyes are as bright as torches. Old Huang admires you. With Strange Stories from a Strange Story, our bookstore will be able to gain a firm foothold in this place. Almost every bookstore had a few popular authors, and a few best-selling novels served as a front. The Yunyan Pavilion had just opened, and there were not many readers. The unexpected popularity of Strange Stories from a Strange Story had allowed them to gain a large number of readers. As long as the subsequent volumes maintained the standard, they would be able to retain these readers and become regular customers of the store. Lu Hanyan coughed softly but did not say anything. Actually, she had only felt pity for Li Mu. She did not even read what he wrote. She did not expect that her small act of kindness would bring about such a huge change in the bookstore. She picked up a book and said to shopkeeper Huang, Look after the store. I have some matters to attend to, so I will go back first. In the small courtyard, Wanwan had just returned after eating and drinking to her heart's content. Li Mu rested for a while, then began to practice the sword manual that Li Qing had given him. Although the Bai sword was an immortal weapon, it was the same as a normal sword. Only when it was combined with sword moves could it unleash its greatest power. When Li Qing battled with the tiger demon only relied on its brute strength and instincts to fight against wild beasts. Li Qing relied on her nimble movements and sword moves to easily suppress the tiger demon even though she did not have the advantage in terms of strength. At that time, Li Mu was determined to consolidate these basic skills. These basic skills could not be learned quickly. There were more than 10 basic sword moves. If he wanted to practice more complex sword techniques, he had to first learn these basic sword moves. Sword piercing, cloud sword, chop sword, hang sword, sweep sword, point sword. Under the scorching sun, Li Mu patiently practiced these basic sword moves over and over again in the courtyard. Only when his entire body was drenched in sweat and he could no longer raise his arms did he put down his sword. He took off his outer and inner robes, leaving only his trousers on. He poured a bucket of cold water over his head, and the cold feeling spread from the top of his head to the rest of his body. He felt indescribably comfortable. After being reborn, Li Mu was quite satisfied with his body. In his previous life he had been bedridden for a long time. His body had long been tortured by illness. Now, although his body was not very strong, it was very healthy. It was just that he did not have the 7 spirits. When he got up in the morning, it was a bit of a fly in the ointment. Because constables often patrolled and practiced, when he took off his clothes, the muscles on his arms were not exaggerated. He also had the 6-pack abs that Li Mu was very envious of in his previous life. His almost perfect figure made even Lu Hanyan, who was at the door, stunned for a moment when she saw it. The next moment she quickly covered her eyes and exclaimed, "Why are you not wearing clothes?" "I just finished practicing and went to take a shower," Li Mu explained. Suddenly he froze on the spot. Although Lu Hanyan covered her eyes, her vision still leaked through the gaps between her fingers. Not only that, at this moment in Li Mu's eyes, her body was shining with a faint light. Yellow light. Of the 7 emotions and 7 colors, yellow was desire. Li Mu swore that from the beginning to the end, he really only treated Lu Hanyan as a friend. He never thought that when he treated her as a friend, she actually wanted to. Li Mu hurriedly guided this trace of desire over. This was the first trace of desire he had collected. Thinking that other people relied on hard work to cultivate, but he actually had to rely on his body, he could not help but feel sad. The light on Lu Hanyan's body flashed and disappeared. She said angrily, "Hurry up and put on your clothes." Chapter 58. Li Mu went back to his room and changed his clothes. When he came out again he observed Lu Hanyan for a while, but he didn't see the light just now. After thinking about it carefully, he understood the reason behind this. If he and Lu Hanyan were to switch roles, if it was Li Mu who saw her naked body, he would probably have a moment of impulse. Just like when he was walking on the road and met a beautiful girl, he would instinctively take a few more glances. This trace of lust was based on instinct, not that Lu Hanyan really had any improper thoughts about him. Li Mu felt that it was a pity. If she really had any improper thoughts about him, it would be good. Lust was related to the condensation of the last soul. It was better to let her take a few more glances than to sell her body. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu with a slightly red face. She wanted to forget the scene just now, but the more she wanted to forget, the clearer the image became. She coughed softly, looked away from Li Mu, and changed the topic. "I'm here to ask you, have you finished writing the 2nd volume of Strange Stories from a Strange Story? Li Mu nodded and said, "It's done. I'll bring it to you later." Lu Hanyan said, "There are many people who like Strange Stories from a Strange Story. After the 2nd volume, I suggest that you and the bookstore distribute the profits according to the profits. At that time, after excluding the printing and labor costs, you can get 50% of the total profits. Do you have any problems with this?" Li Mu understood the market. Ordinary authors could only get 30% of the profits from books. The more famous authors could get 40%. Lu Hanyan gave him 50%, which was already very considerate. Naturally, there was no problem. Lu Hanyan held a book of Strange Stories from a Strange Story, and said to Li Mu, "I have a question." Li Mu raised his eyes and looked at her. "What question?" Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu with a strange look and asked, "Why is it that in your book, the ones who fall in love with human men are either beautiful female ghosts or shape-shifted female demons? Is it?" Without waiting for her to finish, Li Mu explained, "Of course it's because the readers like it. That's why they'll buy it. In order to make money, I have no other choice. I'm not interested in female ghosts or demonesses. I still prefer beautiful women. What I mean is, I still prefer human women." Lu Hanyan looked at him strangely and said, I understand. Before Lu Hanyan left, the way she looked at Li Mu made him very depressed. He just wanted to copy books to make some money. It was not worth it to be seen as a pervert who would be attracted to a female ghost and a fox. Li Mu sighed and returned to the study. He opened the records of monsters in the 10 continents, and started reading. Strange Stories from a Strange Story was just the imagination of a poor scholar. In reality, there was no story of a fox turning into a human and repaying him with her body. In the records of monsters in the 10 continents, there was no record of a fox repaying a debt of gratitude. However, there were a few detailed accounts of a fox taking revenge. The most recent case related to this happened 30 years ago. A county magistrate of a certain county killed a nest of foxes for no reason. He skinned the foxes and made them into foxskin quilts. However, what he did not know was that one of the foxes actually escaped. 20 years later, the fox had successfully cultivated and slaughtered the county magistrate's entire family. It skinned them and pulled out their tendons. Their corpses were hung in front of the county magistrate's gate. Although the fox was killed by the imperial court in the end, it made people have a deep understanding of the fox clan's vengeful nature. Looking at the story about foxes, he wondered what happened to the little fox he saved last time. He hoped it would not fall into the hunter's trap again. Li Mu was distracted for a while and continued to flip through the pages in his hand. Outside Xianxia County, there was a secluded valley in the mountains that was rarely visited by humans. A few foxes were jumping and playing in the mountains. An old woman walked into the valley and the group of foxes immediately rushed over. Grandma, you're back. Grandma, what good things did you bring us this time? It's roast chicken. I smell roast chicken. Grandma, I want to eat roast chicken. The foxes that could speak human language surrounded the old woman and jumped non-stop. The old woman put down the basket she was carrying at her waist and took out a few roast chickens. She distributed them to the foxes. The foxes held the roast chickens in their mouths and ran away quickly. Only a white fox remained in the same place. It looked at her eagerly and said softly, Grandma, Granny hasn't forgotten you? The old woman smiled and took out a thin book from her bosom. She said, This book is the bestseller in the city. Tell me you don't like roasted chicken, but why do you like these things written by humans? If I had known, I wouldn't have taught you how to read. In the old woman's nagging, the little fox held the book in its mouth and ran under the tree. It put the book called Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio on the ground and used its small claws to flip open the pages and read seriously. This story called Xiao Qian made it tear up. When it saw the ending where Xiao Qian and Ning Kaichen lived happily together, its tears turned into laughter. In the story of Fragrance of Lotus, why did the fox spirit and female ghost get together with humans? Could the fox spirit and female ghost also fall in love with humans? Then it saw a fox couplet. It was about 2 fox beauties who barged into a scholar's garden. The scholar sternly told them to leave. The fox spirit sneered at the scholar and made a couplet for him to match. The couplet was Wu and Shu in the same body, only lacking a little in the stomach. The scholar couldn't match it. After the fox spirit sneered at him, she matched the couplet herself and left. Wu and Shu in the same body, only lacking a little in the stomach. The fox spirit matched the couplet with, Already gone, why don't you double pick? The little fox rolled its eyes a few times but still couldn't understand the meaning of the couplet. She couldn't help but admire the fox spirit's literary talent. They were both foxes, but the fox spirit could match the couplet. She couldn't even recognize all the words. She held the book in her mouth and ran to the old woman. She asked curiously, Grandma, what does double pick mean? The old woman looked at the fox couplet, and spat. She said, Don't look at these messy things. Go and practice. Since her grandma didn't tell her, the little fox could only walk back with the book in her mouth. She whispered, Read one more and I'll go and practice. She opened the book again and muttered, Xiao Chui, it's about a fox repaying a debt of gratitude. How does a fox repay a debt of gratitude? Yunyan Pavilion Tea House. Noon was the fixed time for the young storyteller to tell a story. Every day at noon the tea house would be full. Many customers would come an hour in advance to reserve a seat. Those who came late and did not manage to get a seat would order a pot of tea and stand in the corner to drink. To them, drinking tea wasn't important. What was important was listening to the story. God knows where the young man got so many strange stories. Sometimes it was heart-wrenching, sometimes it was thought-provoking, sometimes it was hilarious. Every time people couldn't stop. Today he was telling the story of a fox repaying a debt of gratitude. In Yuntai County there was a hunter. One day when he went hunting in the mountains he caught a fox. Seeing that it was pitiful, he couldn't bear to kill it, so he let it go. But what the hunter didn't expect was that after he let the fox go, something strange happened. Every day when the hunter came back from hunting, there would be a bowl of piping hot porridge in the pot. After drinking the porridge, the hunter went hunting in the mountains. Half a year later, a Taoist priest told the hunter that he had a strong demonic aura. The hunter remembered the porridge and brought it to the Taoist priest. The Taoist priest told the hunter that the porridge couldn't be eaten because it was made by a fox spirit. The next day, the hunter pretended to go hunting and secretly hid in the pile of firewood outside the door. When he heard strange noises coming from inside the house, he suddenly pushed the door open and found, "If you want to know what happened, meet me tomorrow at the same time. Be there or be square. Bastard, you're doing it again. I beg you, please do something humane." Amidst the curses of the crowd, Li Mu jumped off the stage, slipped out of the back door and walked to the front door. He followed the guests of the tea house and cursed Cliffhanger. After he had stirred up enough anger, he came to the county government. After a while, Xianxia walked into the duty room from outside and asked curiously, "Li Mu, have you heard the story of the hunter and the fox? What do you think the hunter saw when he opened the door?" Li Mu said, "Of course it was the fox cooking porridge." Xianxia was stunned. "That's it?" Li Mu glanced at him and said, "What else? If it wasn't porridge, then was it the fox that was blaspheming itself in the pot?" Xianxia stood there thinking. Li Mu saw a familiar figure flash by outside the door and immediately walked out of the duty room. He walked to Li Qing and said, "Boss, I've accumulated enough anger. I think I can start to condense the second spirit." Chapter 59. The courage of the tiger demon was extraordinary. Li Mu could not refine the anger in his body. When it met the pure courage of the tiger demon, it melted instantly. After the sun had set, Li Mu sat cross-legged on the bed with his 5 hearts facing the sky. He said in a low voice, "The 9 cycles of plain qi, the soul controlling evil, the heavenly beast guarding the door, the delicate girl guarding the pass, the 7 souls and softness are at peace with me, do not act rashly." After a few minutes, he suddenly opened his eyes and said, "Concealed arrow, condense." Within Li Mu's body, the gray light that represented anger flashed. It disappeared from the surface of his body into the depths of his flesh. At the same time, Li Mu once again felt the familiar feeling when he condensed the first soul. When the second soul was condensed, the instantaneous increase in his mana was equivalent to a month of cultivation. Li Mu sighed in relief. Although he had only condensed 2 of the 7 souls, it had only taken him a month. If he could condense 2 more souls in the next 4 months, he would be able to break through the half-year limit that the Taoist priest said. After condensing the second soul, Li Mu tried to use the Dao techniques that he could not use before. He found that although his mana had increased, he could only master the first 2 words of the 9 syllables mantra. The only thing was that the casting time was longer than before. Endurance was always a good thing. What he needed to do next was to prepare for the 3rd soul of the Sparrow Shade. Condensing the Sparrow Shade required a large amount of grief. Li Mu had already found the method to collect grief. However, Lu Hanyin had not finished arranging the script of butterfly transformation. No matter how anxious Li Mu was, it was useless. He wanted to ask Lu Hanyin, but she did not come yesterday. However, today was the day that her youth-retaining talisman lost its effect. Li Mu finished the youth-retaining talisman and prepared to ask her when she came to collect it. However, Li Mu waited until night time, but Lu Hanyin did not appear. Li Mu lit a charcoal fire in the courtyard and placed the skewers of meat on it. Not long after, Wan ran over from next door and squatted beside Li Mu to watch. Li Mu handed her a skewer of barbecued streaky pork and asked, "Where is your miss?" Wan said while eating, "Miss is in the shop. She hasn't come back yet." Li Mu asked, "Is the shop very busy these days?" Wan nodded and said, "The tea houses and bookstores have a lot of customers, especially the bookstores. As soon as the new books are printed, they will be sold out." A few bookstores asked about the author of strange stories from Liao Zhai, but young mistress didn't tell them. There was also a bookstore that wanted to buy strange stories from Liao Zhai, but young mistress didn't agree. Lu Hanyin was a woman, but she dared to wander around in an unfamiliar place with a servant girl. She had to resist pressure from all sides. It was indeed not easy. Li Mu had Wan bring the youth-retaining talisman back to her. Ever since his mana increased, the effectiveness of the youth-retaining talisman increased from 3 days to more than 6 days. The effectiveness of Fulu was mainly related to 2 factors. One was the quality of the materials used. Ordinary cinnabar and yellow paper could only carry a limited amount of mana. No matter how powerful the talisman writer was, he would not be able to draw a fulu that exceeded the limits of the materials. The second was the cultivation of the talisman writer. When the quality of the fulu materials was extremely high, the greater the mana of the talisman writer, the longer the power and effectiveness of the fulu. Of course, this was for ordinary cultivators. Some of the more powerful cultivators could even condense talismans out of thin air. Of course, this was not something that Li Mu could come into contact with at his current level. After condensing the second essence, he returned to the Yamen to cancel his injury leave and patrolled Weiyang Street daily. The Yunyan Pavilion was located on Weiyang Street. Li Mu was wearing his official uniform. When he strolled into the tea house, he heard a commotion coming from inside. Where's that scumbag who always ends chapters? Why hasn't he come out today? Hurry up and call him out. We've been waiting here for more than an hour. We still haven't finished the story of the fox's repayment yesterday. What did the hunter see when he opened the door? The waiter of the tea house looked at the crowd and said helplessly, "That storyteller has already left the tea house. We don't know where he went either." What? Left? Why would he leave? Did you guys embezzle his wages? Hurry up and call him out. If he doesn't come out today, I'm not leaving. Li Mu stood at the door and listened for a while. Then he shook his head and left. Now that the second essence had been condensed, he no longer needed to collect their anger by breaking chapters. His identity as a storyteller had naturally come to an end. He had returned to his original job as a constable. Walking out of the tea house and passing by the bookstore, Li Mu heard a familiar voice coming from inside. His footsteps paused. In the bookstore, Lu Hanyan's pretty face was frosty. She said to a middle-aged man, "Shopkeeper Ren, what you said is impossible. Please go back." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "Shopkeeper Lu, why do you have to do this? We can all do business together. You're just a weak woman. Don't you feel tired running such a big store?" "I'm just helping you out of kindness," Lu Hanyan said with a cold face. "Shopkeeper Ren, you don't have to worry." The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "Since Shopkeeper Lu is unwilling, I won't force you. Goodbye." Li Mu walked in from outside and turned to take a look. Then he turned back and asked, "Who was that?" "The shopkeeper of the Four Seas bookstore." Lu Hanyan walked to the table and said, he wanted to buy the rest of Strange Stories from Liao Zhai and publish it with the Yunyan Pavilion. I rejected him. There was no copyright protection law in this world. The Yunyan Pavilion's books could be printed by other bookstores. Similarly, the Yunyan Pavilion could also print their books. However, without the original manuscripts, they had to wait until the Yunyan Pavilion sold the books. Then they would buy the printed books back and reprint them. Reprinting took a lot of time and effort. In the middle of this, a lot of time would be wasted. Others would have already bought the books from the Yunyan Pavilion. The ones they worked so hard to print could only be destroyed in their hands. Only by having the original manuscripts could they dominate the market and obtain the greatest profits. Lu Hanyan was a little angry. She said, "Strange Stories from Liao Zhai is now the Yunyan Pavilion's top book. New customers rely on it to attract them. How can we sell it to them? Moreover, the price they offered was clearly robbery. They're bullying me because I'm new here and don't have anyone above me." Li Mu glanced at her and said, "Who said you don't have anyone above you?" Lu Hanyan said, "Wan and I have only been here for less than 2 months. We don't have time to make arrangements. How can there be anyone above me? Don't say that a bailiff is not an official." Li Mu looked at her with dissatisfaction and said, "Don't forget, this is my jurisdiction. Everything that happens on Weiyang Street is under my jurisdiction. The person above you is me." Lu Hanyan glanced at him and asked, "Is a bailiff an official?" "No." Li Mu turned and walked outside. He said, "Since a bailiff is not an official, if you get bullied in the future, don't come looking for me." Lu Hanyan hurriedly pulled him and said, It's fine. Lordly, I'm new here. I'll rely on you to take care of me in the future. Lord, please sit. I'll make tea for you." Strictly speaking, a bailiff was not an official but an official. However, an official in Great Zhou received a salary from the state and was not just an errand boy. Any case that happened on Weiyang Street, whether it was theft, robbery, bullying, molesting, or swindling, Li Mu had the right to manage it. After the event, he only needed to submit an official document to the Jianghu County magistrates. If there was a serious case in his jurisdiction, Li Mu also had to take responsibility. Li Mu finished his tea and went out to continue patrolling. Lu Hanyan personally saw him out. Watching the figure in official uniform disappear into the crowd, Lu Hanyan looked away. Her eyes were still a little absent-minded. When she was 7 years old, she was sold to the music house by her parents. She could only eat 1 meal a day. The rest of her time was spent practicing the zither. When her fingers were cut by the zither strings, she had to bandage them herself. When she was bullied by the older musicians, she could only endure it. She practiced with all her might and learned all the instruments in the music house. She played for more than 12 hours a day and refused the help of countless men who had ulterior motives. After she saved enough money to redeem herself, she played even harder and earned enough money to open a shop. All of this was her own hard work. When she was hungry, she would cook for herself. When her clothes were torn, she would mend them herself. Alone, she brought a servant girl and traveled thousands of miles from Jianghu to here. She bought 4 shops and recruited people from everywhere to open the Union Pavilion. For more than 10 years, she had never relied on anyone. She also never knew what it felt like to have someone to rely on. Now she seemed to know. Chapter 60. Lu Hanyin seemed to have realized that Weiyang Street was under Li Mu's protection. She had treated him exceptionally well these past 2 days. Not only did she personally cook for lunch, the dishes she made were all Li Mu's favorites. If not for the fact that she did not take any further action, Li Mu would have reason to suspect that she had some thoughts about him after seeing his body that day. After eating and drinking to their fill, Lu Hanyin went to work on the shop. Li Mu went to the study and took out a brush, ink and talisman paper to practice a few of the new fulu that he had learned. Other than Taoist techniques, many of the Taoist spells and fulu techniques were open and transparent. Li Mu was not a disciple of the fulu school and could not learn the unique fulu techniques of the fulu school. However, he could obtain some of the basic fulu techniques through other means. After condensing the second essence, Li Mu asked Old Wang to search his library. He actually found a complete collection of the basic fulu techniques of Taoism. Other than the soul-locking talisman and the youth-retaining talisman, Li Mu also found a few other fulu techniques that he could draw at his current level. The ghost-seeking talisman had a similar effect as the Immortal shows the way. However, it was not as comprehensive as the Immortal shows the way. Could only search for ghosts by sensing yin qi. Of course, with the incomplete effect, the restriction on mana was much less. With Li Mu's current insignificant cultivation, he could easily draw it. The opposite of the ghost-seeking talisman was the demon-seeking talisman. It worked on a similar principle. Those with profound cultivation could use these 2 types of fulu to search for demons and ghosts within a radius of dozens of miles. Li Mu's mana was limited. The fulu's sensing range was only a few dozen feet. In addition, he had also learned an evil-warding talisman and a ghost-slaying talisman. As for divine abilities, with his current cultivation he could not learn a single one. He had only learned 2 or 3 small auxiliary spells. In fact, what Li Mu wanted to learn the most was the soul-searching talisman, which was the fulu that he used to search his past memories. However, this fulu was not of the lowest level and required a cultivator of the soul condensation realm to write it. Fortunately, he had gotten a few from Li Qing last time, which was enough for him to use for a while. Li Mu picked up a piece of fulu paper, stuck it to his forehead, and began to copy the rest of the content. He had to make some slight changes to the names of the places and the names of the officials to make it fit the geography of the 10 continents and 3 islands. On the way back to the county office, Li Mu passed by the Union Pavilion. He took a look and realized that there were more customers than the previous 2 days. Xianxia County was not big and there were even fewer people who were literate. However, in the North County, Xianxia County was located on the main road and was the hub that connected all the counties. Usually, there would be a lot of people and it could guarantee a steady flow of customers. This was probably the reason why Lu Hanyin chose to set up her shop in Xianxia County. Indeed, strange stories did not disappoint Li Mu. On one hand, he could earn a steady income from it. On the other hand, as a new shop, the Union Pavilion could attract customers and stand firm against the competition of other bookstores. This was Li Mu's way of repaying Lu Hanyin. In a tea house not far from the Union Pavilion, seeing the steady flow of customers, a young man said, "Shopkeeper, that Lu woman is quite capable. She's only been in Xianxia County for a little more than a month, but her business has grown to this extent. She's even snatched away many of our customers." The middle-aged man sitting next to him smiled and said, "She's still too young and doesn't know how to do business. She's a woman who's new here and doesn't have any background. Doing this will anger a lot of people." The young man asked, "Should we teach her a lesson?" "No need." The middle-aged man waved his hand and said, "Yesterday I saw that Rin from the Four Seas bookstore went to the Union Pavilion. He seemed to want to discuss some terms with shopkeeper Lu. In the end, it didn't seem like they came to an agreement. Rin isn't a good person." The young man hesitated and said, "But if we don't do anything now, the Four Seas bookstore will take all the benefits. What's the hurry?" The middle-aged man said, "Let's wait and see." If a woman dares to make a living outside, who knows if she has any background? Let the Four Seas bookstore test the waters first. The young man thought for a while and saluted the middle-aged man with admiration. Shopkeeper, you're really thoughtful. While eating with Wanwan, Li Mu suddenly remembered that he hadn't seen Lu Hanyan for 2 or 3 days. The Yunyan Pavilion had 4 shops in Yangqiu County. Among them, the bookstore's business was the best. After Li Mu left, the tea house's business declined. Lu Hanyan discussed with Li Mu and asked him to go to the tea house as a storyteller once every 7 days. Li Mu agreed without hesitation. He had a lot of stories and didn't have to worry about finishing them. Once every 7 days wasn't a lot. There was no harm in collecting more stories of the 7 emotions. A Chinese strange stories from a strange story allowed the bookstore to gain a foothold in Yangqiu County. As for the music and opera house, they were just getting started. Coincidentally, the music and opera for transforming into butterflies were being arranged. Lu Hanyan was busy with these and had been resting in the shop for the past 2 days. After Wanwan finished eating, she looked at Li Mu pitifully and asked, "Can you cook another bowl of noodles?" "I'll send it to Miss later." Li Mu nodded and said, "I'll be going to the county office later. I'll send it to her on the way." He looked at Wanwan and asked, "How old is your miss this year?" The young girl thought for a while and said, 21. Lu Hanyan was 3 years older than Li Mu. Women in Great Zhou didn't get married so early. However, when they were 18 or 19 years old, they usually considered getting married. It was rare for them to not get married at 21 years old. Li Mu asked in a gossipy manner, "Hasn't she thought about getting married?" Wanwan was puzzled and asked, "Why would she want to get married?" Li Mu said, "When she gets married she'll have someone to rely on." Wanwan said, "Miss said that she doesn't rely on men. She only relies on herself. Men are unreliable." After thinking for a while she realized something. She immediately looked at Li Mu and said, "I'm not talking about young master. Young master is not a thing." Li Mu roughly knew why Lu Hanyan had developed such a personality. Her parents' betrayal had caused great harm to her heart. After she became an adult, she wouldn't easily trust anyone. Of course, another important reason was that she was originally a rich woman. In this world, there weren't many things that couldn't be bought with money. She didn't need to rely on others. It was more likely that others relied on her. When Li Mu sent the food to Yunyan Pavilion, Lu Hanyan was arranging a song in the music workshop. Li Mu didn't understand music and could only rely on his memory. Lu Hanyan needed to keep the main structure of The Lovers of Liang and recompose it. This wasn't an easy task. Li Mu saw that her complexion was somewhat haggard. He put the food box on the table and said, "Eat and rest. If you continue like this, the youth-retaining talisman won't have any effect." Lu Hanyan nodded, but her gaze didn't leave the score. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Remember to eat. I'm going to patrol." A moment later, Lu Hanyan put down the score and leaned back on the chair. She stretched her body and suddenly heard a sound from her stomach. She then remembered that she had been changing the tune of transforming into a butterfly since early morning and hadn't eaten anything. She opened the food box on the table. The bowl of Xianxia noodles was still steaming. A poached egg lay in the bowl, exuding a tempting fragrance. Lu Hanyan's appetite was greatly stimulated. She picked up the chopsticks and quickly finished the bowl of noodles. She even drank the soup. It had to be said that Wanwan didn't like to eat the noodles he cooked for no reason. After eating, she rubbed her sore eyebrows. She remembered Li Mu's advice and wanted to rest. However, she remembered that as long as she slept for the next 2 days, she would have terrible nightmares. After hesitating for a moment, she picked up the score again. The night was quiet. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the bed, guiding her cultivation as usual. At a certain moment, his closed eyes suddenly opened. Just a moment ago, Li Mu suddenly felt a trace of vigilance in his heart. This vigilance was very subtle. If he hadn't been concentrating on his cultivation, he might not have noticed it. After a cultivator refined the first soul, the corpse dog, he could develop spiritual awareness outside of the 5 senses. He could keenly sense the impending danger. This sense of vigilance was so subtle that it meant that the danger was not directed at Li Mu. Or perhaps, the thing that triggered this sense of vigilance was too weak to pose much of a threat to him. Perhaps he was too sensitive. Li Mu closed his eyes again. However, not long after, his eyes opened again. He suddenly stood up and looked in a certain direction. Just a moment ago, he felt a trace of vigilance in his heart. The source of this feeling was the house of Lu Hanyan and Wanwan. At the same time, the ghost-hunting talisman on the table also emitted a faint fluctuation of mana. Chapter 61. Li Mu walked out of the room and came to the courtyard wall. With a light leap, his whole body flew up and landed in the courtyard next door. It was already late at night. Lu Hanyin and Wan Wan had already gone to bed, and the lights in all the rooms had been extinguished. Li Mu walked to the door of Lu Hanyin's bedroom. He heard two breathing sounds coming from the room and also felt two familiar auras. One belonged to Lu Hanyin and the other belonged to Wan Wan. There was also another aura full of yin qi which did not belong to a human. The door was closed but the window was opened a small crack. Lu Hanyin must have opened it to ventilate the night. Li Mu opened the window and jumped in. He used his heavenly eye and looked in the direction of the bed. Lu Hanyin and Wan Wan were sleeping on the bed. An illusory shadow floated above them. Traces of yin qi spread out from the illusory shadow and wrapped around Lu Hanyin's body. In her sleep, Lu Hanyin seemed to have dreamed of something terrible. Her beautiful eyebrows were tightly knitted, and her body was curled up, trembling slightly. Suddenly a figure appeared in the room. The resentful spirit also turned her head and looked over. She did not know why this person broke into the boudoir of two women in the middle of the night. The figure slowly floated over and floated in front of Li Mu, tilting her head to look at him. The female ghost's hair was disheveled, and her face was pale and bloodless. There were only the whites of her eyes in her dead fish eyes. There were no pupils, but her lips were strangely red. If Li Mu had encountered this ghost a month ago, he would have been frightened. At this moment, not only did he not have the slightest fear, but he also smiled at the female ghost and asked, "Have you seen enough?" The female ghost's figure immediately retreated, as if she had been greatly frightened. She screamed, "You can see me?" Li Mu said coldly, "What kind of ghost are you? How dare you be so presumptuous here? Who let you come here?" The ghost didn't answer, but a panicked cry came from the direction of the bed. It was unknown when Lu Hanyin had woken up. She shielded Wan Wan with one hand and wrapped the quilt with the other. She shouted, "Who are you? Why are you here? Hurry up and leave. If you don't leave, I'll call for help. My neighbor is a constable. He's very powerful." Li Mu said helplessly, "It's me." Hearing Li Mu's voice, Lu Hanyin was slightly relieved, but she still wrapped the quilt tightly around her body and asked nervously, "What are you doing here?" "Now is not the time to talk about this." Li Mu glanced at the ghost and saw that she was about to escape. With a wave of his hand, a fulu flew out and stuck to the door. The ghost wanted to escape through the door but was bounced back. She ran to the window and another fulu flew out. Li Mu used 5 exorcism talismans in a row and stuck them in 4 directions of the room. He even stuck one on the roof, completely blocking the female ghost's path. Lu Hanyin shrank in the corner of the bed and asked in panic, "What are you doing?" She had just woken up from a nightmare when she saw a black shadow standing in the room. She was greatly frightened. When she heard Li Mu's voice, she was slightly relieved, but when she saw his strange behavior, she was still a little panicked. As a man, he broke into her bedroom in the middle of the night. If it weren't for her trust in Li Mu, she would have already started shouting. Li Mu flicked his fingers slightly, and the lights in the bedroom were lit up, illuminating the room. The light made Lu Hanyin's heart calm down. When she saw Li Mu, she immediately lowered her head and said in a trembling voice, What do you want to do?" Li Mu looked down and realized that he was worried that Lu Hanyin and Wan Wan would be in danger. He came out in a hurry and didn't even have time to put on his clothes. At this moment, his upper body was still naked. Generally, in this kind of situation, it was obvious that he was here to pick flowers. If it was in court, Li Mu wouldn't even have a chance to explain. In order to avoid Lu Hanyin's misunderstanding, he thought for a moment and strode to Lu Hanyin's bed. What do you want to do? Don't come over." "Li Mu, how can you do this?" Li Mu didn't explain anything. He made a hand seal with his right hand. After channeling his magic, he pointed his index finger at Lu Hanyin's forehead. "Don't go away." Lu Hanyin protected Wan Wan. Her voice was trembling. She wrapped herself in the quilt and curled up in the corner of the bed. However, Li Mu didn't make any next move. She raised her head and saw that Li Mu was still standing by the bed. And in the corner of her room, there was a figure in white. The woman's hair was disheveled, her lips were red like blood, and her eyes were only white. She was exactly the same as the female ghost that appeared in her dreams these 2 days. Ghost. Her face turned pale. She covered her head with the quilt and hid in the corner of the bed, trembling. She said in shock, "Li Mu, there's a ghost, there's a ghost." The female ghost's path was blocked by Fulu. She knew that this person had some skills. Her body floated up and pounced on Li Mu. In the next moment, a golden light appeared in her eyes. When her hands touched the golden light, they immediately collapsed. The female ghost screamed and retreated. She curled up in the corner and looked at Li Mu in horror. She screamed, "Don't come here, don't come here." Li Mu forced the female ghost to the corner. While absorbing her fear, he coldly asked, "How dare you harm people in the county? Tell me who ordered you." Wanwan said that Lu Hanyan often had nightmares these 2 days. Li Mu originally thought that she was too tired. When he saw the female ghost, he realized that it was her doing. This resentful spirit repeatedly used ghost tricks on Lu Hanyan. It caused her body to be invaded by yin qi. If it was light, she would be weak for a while. If it was serious, she would fall seriously ill and her life would be in danger. The female ghost curled up in the corner. She lowered her head and did not dare to look at Li Mu. She said in a trembling voice, "I was ordered by someone. That person captured one of my souls. If I don't do as he said, he will disperse my soul." Li Mu asked, "Who?" The female ghost shook her head and said, "I don't know. He only said that after it was done, he would come and find me." Li Mu continued to ask, "What did he ask you to do?" The female ghost said, "He just asked me to pester this lady. For a person with 7 complete souls, with the cultivation of a vengeful spirit, it was impossible to directly harm them. It could only use some methods to torture their minds and drive the yin energy to invade their bodies. Through this indirect method, after half a month, the victim's mind and body would be on the verge of collapse, and they would die in a short period of time. The popular saying for this was that if one was haunted by something evil and did not ask someone to exorcise it, they would not live long. Some Jianghu swindlers took advantage of people's psychology to cheat. Some of the bolder ones would even raise a little ghost and drive it to harm people. When the person was tortured to the point of death, they would appear as a master and perform a play of catching ghosts and exorcising evil spirits. They would collect a high fee from it. These people had always been the targets of the Yaman's strict crackdown. Lu Hanyin had just arrived and someone had asked a little ghost to harm her. Li Mu did not need to guess to know that it must be because of business matters. However, he did not know who did it for the time being. However, there was no need to worry. Since they did this, they must have a purpose. They would definitely appear when the time was right. Li Mu looked back at Lu Hanyin and found that although she covered her head in the quilt, she still lifted a corner of the quilt and looked outside in panic. Li Mu glanced at the female ghost and said, "You turn around and stand facing the wall." Li Mu had seen many demonic ghosts and even fought zombies. Naturally, he was not afraid of her appearance. However, when a normal person saw her ghost appearance, they could not help but be afraid. The female ghost obediently turned around and stood facing the wall. Li Mu walked to the bedside and said to Lu Hanyin, "That female ghost has been subdued by me. It's fine." Wanwan was awakened by the movement in the room. She crawled out of the quilt and rubbed her sleepy eyes. When she saw Li Mu, she was stunned and asked doubtfully, "Young master, why are you here?" She looked at Li Mu and caught a glimpse of a white shadow in the corner of the room. Coincidentally, the female ghost looked back nervously and met her eyes. "Ghost, ghost." The girl jumped up from the bed and threw herself into Li Mu's arms. She cried out loud. Li Mu turned his head and coldly glanced at the female ghost. He angrily said, "Turn around. If you dare to look back, I will destroy your body and soul." Chapter 62. It was not a good idea to be naked all the time. At least, Wanwan and Lu Hanyin were still wearing undergarments. Li Mu did not have the habit of wearing clothes when he slept at night. He comforted Wanwan, put away the talisman and drove the female ghost to his yard. Then he put her in the soul-recovering bag he picked up from the lizard spirit last time. After getting dressed, he went to the next door again. The 2 girls were already dressed. Lu Hanyin's face was still a little pale, and Wanwan's little face was still wet with tears. She shrank in the corner of the bed and shivered. Obviously, she was scared by the female ghost. Lu Hanyin looked at Li Mu and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I thought." "It's okay." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "I just sensed the yin qi here and was worried that you were in danger. I came out in a hurry and may have scared you." Lu Hanyin looked around timidly and asked, "Then where is the female ghost?" Li Mu said, "I took her. Tomorrow I'll bring her to the county office for questioning." He looked at Lu Hanyin and said, "The female ghost said that she was ordered by someone. Do you have any suspects?" Lu Hanyin shook her head and said, "The Yunyan Pavilion's business is getting better and better. It affects the interests of too many people. I don't know who it is." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Tomorrow I'll report this to the county magistrate. Don't worry, no matter who is behind this, we'll catch them and deal with them impartially." The female ghost had been subdued. It was already late at night. Li Mu didn't want to stay here any longer. He said, It's very late. You should rest first. I'll deal with this matter tomorrow. Li Mu turned and prepared to leave. Lu Hanyin grabbed his hand and said in panic, "Don't go." At this moment she only had the weakness of a woman. She no longer had the aura of a female shopkeeper. Wanwan quickly ran over and hugged Li Mu's arm. She sobbed, "Young master, I'm scared." In the middle of the night, a man and a woman were alone in a room. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "How about this? I'll stick a few exorcism talismans outside. In this way, even if there are ghosts, they can't come in." Lu Hanyin asked in a trembling voice, "Will there be more ghosts coming?" Li Mu wasn't sure either. He could only comfort her by saying, "I don't think so." Lu Hanyin gave Wanwan a look. The little maidservant hugged Li Mu's arm and shook it. She begged, "Young master, I'm scared. Please don't go." If it was just Lu Hanyin, Li Mu could barely hold himself back. However, Wanwan was with him day and night. They even ate at the same table. When Li Mu was injured, she poured tea and massaged his back and shoulders. Looking at her pale face, Li Mu couldn't refuse. Li Mu hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, "Then you can sleep. I'll keep watch outside." Anyway, he planned to cultivate at night. The courtyard was open, so the effect of cultivation would be better. "How can that be? Wanwan, go and bring a quilt over." Lu Hanyin shook her head and looked at Li Mu. She said, "I'll have to trouble you to sleep on the ground tonight." "No need." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I'll be fine outside." Seeing Li Mu walk out, Lu Hanyin sat at the head of the bed, her eyes wandering. It was unknown what she was thinking. Wanwan hugged the quilt and quickly fell asleep again. A sweet smile appeared on her little face. Lu Hanyin stroked her head and looked outside. Although she couldn't see Li Mu's figure, she still felt indescribably calm. It seemed that as long as he was outside, even if some terrifying evil spirit came, it wouldn't be so terrible. After rejecting Lu Hanyin's proposal, Li Mu walked outside, closed the door and sat at the stone table in the courtyard. The moon tonight was very round and the moonlight was bright and clear. Li Mu didn't immediately cultivate. Instead, he stared at the moon in a daze. It had been nearly 2 months since he came here. Because the non-poisonous soul hadn't been condensed, it was very difficult for him to fall asleep at night. He could only pass the time by guiding and cultivating. The night was long. He would often think of things from his previous life. Although his current body was no longer tormented by illness, there were still many things in that world that were worthy of his attachment. Lu Hanyin slowly walked over and draped a shawl over Li Mu's shoulders. She asked, "What are you thinking about?" Li Mu withdrew his gaze from the moon and said, "Thinking about the past, family, friends?" Lu Hanyin sat beside him with her arms around her knees. Looking at the moon above her head, she said, "I've forgotten what my family looks like." Li Mu still clearly remembered the appearance of his parents. With the soul-searching talisman, his memories were even clearer. He looked at Lu Hanyin and said, "I have a fulu that can let you recover your past memories." "There's no need." Lu Hanyin shook her head and said, "It's not easy for me to come to this point. I don't want to recall the past. How can there be such a strange fulu in this world?" Li Mu didn't continue this topic. He asked, "Why don't you go to sleep?" Lu Hanyin said, "I can't sleep." Li Mu asked, "Were you scared by that female ghost?" Lu Hanyin looked at him and asked in surprise, "Aren't you afraid of ghosts?" "I used to be afraid." Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Later on I've seen a lot of them, so I'm not afraid anymore. The evil ghosts are nothing but tricks. Your means are more powerful than theirs, so they should be afraid." Lu Hanyin sighed and said, "You're obviously young, but you've experienced so much. It's not easy to be a constable, is it?" Li Mu smiled and said, "Nothing in this world is easy. For me it's easy to catch ghosts, but it's difficult to run a shop. If I were you, I wouldn't be able to get to where you are today." As Li Mu spoke, there was suddenly no response beside him. He was about to turn his head when he felt a weight on his shoulder. Lu Hanyin was leaning on his shoulder and had fallen asleep. She had been haunted by the resentful ghost for the past few days, and she had suffered such a fright tonight. She should have a good rest. Li Mu picked her up and returned to the room. He put her on the bed and covered her with a quilt. Then he left and closed the door. When Lu Hanyin and Wanwan got up and opened the door, they saw that Li Mu was not outside the door. They panicked for no reason. At this moment, a figure flew over the courtyard wall and landed in the yard. Wanwan's eyes widened and she said in shock, "Young master can fly. You're awake." Li Mu looked at them and said, "I've made breakfast. Come and eat." Breakfast was very simple. Li Mu cooked some porridge and 2 side dishes. Wanwan drank 3 bowls of porridge in a row. She put down the bowl and wiped her mouth. She looked at Li Mu pitifully and said, "Young master, can you teach me how to catch ghosts?" Li Mu looked at her and asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Are you not afraid of ghosts?" "I'm afraid." Wan retracted her head. After a moment she summoned her courage and said, "But I want to protect Mississippi." Lu Hanyin looked at her dotingly and then looked at Li Mu and asked, "Can we cultivate?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Everyone can cultivate, but everyone has different aptitudes and talents, and the difficulty of cultivation is also different. However, as long as one is willing to work hard and learn Dao techniques for 2 to 3 years, no matter how bad one's talent is, dealing with ghosts like last night is still more than enough." Lu Hanyin hesitated for a moment and finally summoned her courage to ask Li Mu, "Can you teach me cultivation?" After that she hurriedly said, "I know this request may be a bit too much. If your sect doesn't allow it, then forget it. What's wrong with that?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't have any sect. I usually cultivate by myself. If you want to learn, I can teach you." Lu Hanyin's face lit up with joy. "I want to." Li Mu put down his chopsticks and said, "Wait for me to come back tonight. I have to go to the yamen to deal with that female ghost." Lu Hanyin nodded. "I'll wait for you." Yangqiu County Government. Jianghu County Magistrate sat in the front hall and said, "I have some impression of Yunyan Pavilion. It's a newly opened shop in our county more than a month ago. I heard that their business is very good. At the end of the year they will definitely pay taxes. What do you think happened to Yunyan Pavilion?" Li Mu said, "The shopkeeper of Yunyan Pavilion encountered some problems today. Someone used evil ghosts to harm people. This was much worse than a robbery." After Jianghu County magistrates heard Li Mu's report, he slammed the table and said angrily, "This is outrageous. How can there be such audacious people in Yangqiu County?" Li Mu. "Yes, sir." County Magistrate Zhang said in a low voice, "This is a case that happened in your jurisdiction. I order you to protect the shopkeeper of the Yunyan Pavilion. You must ensure her safety. If anything happens to her, I will hold you accountable." Li Mu cupped his hands. "Yes, sir." Chapter 63. In Great Zhou, public security and tax collection were important criteria for local officials. Lu Hanyin was the shopkeeper of Yunyan Pavilion. Yunyan Pavilion had 4 shops and was a major taxpayer in Yangqiu County. Therefore, Jianghu County magistrates attached great importance to this case and ordered Li Mu to protect her closely. Fortunately, she was his neighbor. After Li Mu returned to the county office to report, he received orders from Jianghu County magistrates and returned home. Lu Hanyin and Wan hadn't left yet. After what happened yesterday, they didn't dare to return to their courtyard. One was washing dishes in the kitchen, and the other was helping Li Mu tidy up his room. Lu Hanyin made Li Mu's bed. She turned around and saw him enter the room. She was surprised and asked, "Why are you back so soon?" Li Mu said, "The county magistrate attached great importance to this case and asked me to protect you closely. I will be by your side for the next 2 days." "That's great." Lu Hanyin smiled and said eagerly, "Then teach me how to cultivate first." Li Mu knew 2 cultivation methods. One was Haotian Taoism and the other was Buddhism. The Haotian Taoism cultivation method was taught to him by Li Qing. Later on, the half of the Taoist book that Suhi gave him had detailed records. The Buddhism cultivation method originated from the scripture Xuandu gave him. That was only an introductory scripture with no follow-up. It wasn't suitable to teach Lu Hanyin. Moreover, without Xuandu's permission he couldn't teach it to anyone casually. There were no secrets in Taoism cultivation. Some demons and monsters worshipped Taoism and would also cultivate Taoism. Li Qing taught Li Mu, and Li Mu taught Lu Hanyin. There was nothing wrong with that. After making up his mind, Li Mu looked at her and said, "Get on the bed." Lu Hanyin looked at him blankly and asked, "What?" Li Mu added, "Just take off your shoes." Lu Hanyin was a little hesitant. Although it was just taking off her shoes, it wasn't convenient for a woman's feet to be seen by men other than her husband. She looked up at Li Mu and asked, "Can I not take them off?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Cultivation requires the 5 hearts to face the sky. The 5 hearts are the hearts of the feet, palms, and the top of the head. You need to maintain a specific posture. Since it's your first time cultivating, the posture must be correct." Lu Hanyin thought of the nightmares of the past few days and the horror of the female ghost. Her cultivation heart immediately became firm. She silently took off her shoes and sat on the bed. Lu Hanyin's feet were white, slender, and well-proportioned. Her toes were small and round. Li Mu subconsciously took a few more glances. It was the first time Lu Hanyin was barefoot in front of a man. Feeling Li Mu's gaze, her face turned red and she hurriedly covered it with her skirt. Li Mu coughed lightly and looked away. He said, "Lift your left foot to the base of your right thigh. Place your right foot on the base of your left thigh. Make the hearts of your feet face the sky and the palms face the sky. Place them on your legs. Draw qi into your nose and slowly into your abdomen. Keep going down. When you feel stuffy, slowly exhale from your mouth." Li Mu's path of cultivation had been introduced by Li Qin. He had long been familiar with the process of guiding others to enter the sect. While Lu Hanyan was trying to breathe, Li Mu stretched out his index finger and gently touched her forehead. He sent a weak trace of mana into her body. He looked at Lu Hanyan and asked, "Do you feel a warm current?" Lu Hanyan nodded and said in surprise, "It seems like something has entered my body." Li Mu controlled the flow of mana in her body as he said, "Focus your attention and guard your mind. Remember the circulation path of this trace of mana in your body. Try to use your mind to guide it." In order to help her remember the circulation path of her dermic powers, Li Mu let this trace of dermic powers circulate in her body for a quarter of an hour before slowly retracting his finger from Lu Hanyan's forehead. With a pale face he said, "I left a trace of dermic powers in your body. You just have to circulate it according to the path just now when you're guiding it. When you've cultivated your own dermic powers, I'll teach you how to refine your soul. This trace of mana will not stay in Lu Hanyan's body for too long. If her talent is average or if she is lazy, by the time this trace of mana dissipates, she will still not have cultivated her own mana. If it is still the same after a few times, it means that she has no fate with cultivation. Li Mu will also not be able to help her." Lu Hanyan took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat on Li Mu's forehead. She said gratefully, "Thank you." "It's nothing." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "I will rest for a while first, then I will go help Wanwan." After teaching Lu Hanyan how to guide the mana, Li Mu went outside. Looking at Wanwan sitting on the swing under the tree, he thought of what happened last night and asked in confusion, "Wanwan, how did you see the female ghost last night?" Last night, the vengeful spirit did not take the initiative to show itself. If Li Mu did not open Lu Hanyan's eyes, she would not have been able to see it. But Li Mu did not do anything to Wanwan, so how did she see it? Speaking of the female ghost last night, Wanwan's small face could not help but turn pale. She jumped down from the swing and tugged on Li Mu's sleeve. She shook her head and said, I also do not know." Li Mu could not figure it out for a moment, so he planned to ask old Wang when he returned to the government office. He stopped thinking about it for the time being and said, "Come to my room with me. I will teach you cultivation. When your cultivation is successful, you can catch ghosts by yourself in the future." Hearing that Li Mu wanted to teach her cultivation, Wanwan followed him to the room eagerly. Li Mu walked to the bed and said, "Take off your shoes and get on the bed." Wanwan was not as shy as Lu Hanyan. She quickly took off her shoes and socks and climbed onto the bed. Li Mu stood in front of the bed and said, "Bend your left foot to the base of your right thigh, then bend your right foot to the base of your left thigh." Wanwan picked up her fat foot. After trying for a while, she said in distress, "I can't bend it over." The movement of the 5 hearts facing the sky required a certain flexibility of the body. It was not easy for the average person to do it. Wanwan's short legs were not as slender as Lu Hanyan's legs. After trying for a long time, she was still unable to cross her legs. Her legs were under her skirt. Li Mu could not help her, so he could only turn around and say, "Try to use more strength. This is a fixed position for cultivation. You must do it." Wanwan hugged her small foot and tried to bend it. She cried, "It hurts." Li Mu comforted her, "Bear with it. It won't hurt in a while." After a while, the little maid said with a sobbing voice, "It still hurts." In this short period of time, Lu Hanyan poked her head outside the door 3 times. Li Mu could not stand it anymore. He walked to the door and said, "Come and help her." After less than an hour, Li Mu walked into the courtyard and let out a long sigh. Teaching them cultivation was more tiring than fighting with demons and ghosts. However, he finally passed a trace of transcendence energy into the master and servants' bodies. Next, they would have to rely on themselves. Teaching Lu Hanyan and Wanwan to cultivate was a piece of cake for Li Mu. Whether they could succeed or not depended on their talent and hard work. Even if they only had a little talent for cultivation, after cultivating for a few days, they would be able to improve their cultivation and have more ability to protect themselves. Li Mu could not always be by their side. 2 weak women, alone outside, if they did not have any tricks up their sleeves, it would be too dangerous. The female ghost that was pestering Lu Hanyan was temporarily guarded by Li Mu in the soul recovering bag. It had a one-way connection with the person behind the case. At this time, the other party had no idea that the female ghost had fallen into Li Mu's hands. After lunch, in order to not arouse the suspicion of the person behind the scenes, Li Mu first let Lu Hanyin go to the shop before he left the house. Although the Jianghu County magistrates asked him to protect Lu Hanyin closely, Li Mu still kept a certain distance from her to avoid alerting the enemy. He walked on the street. Zhang Shan and Li Si were eating noodles on the side of the street. They caught a glimpse of Li Mu from afar. Zhang Shan waved to Li Mu and said, "Li Mu, over here." Li Mu walked over. Zhang Shan waved to the stall owner and said, "Boss, another bowl of noodles." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "No, I've already eaten at home." Lu Hanyin cooked for lunch. Only the dishes were washed by Li Mu. Zhang Shan asked curiously, "What's the matter? You haven't eaten with us for a long time. Is there someone at home or something?" Li Mu sat down beside him and said, "Cut the crap. Come with me after lunch. There's a case that needs you." Chapter 64. Yunyan Pavilion. Not long after Lu Hanyin returned to the shop, shopkeeper Huang came up and said, "Miss, shopkeeper Ren of the Four Seas bookstore is here." The Four Seas bookstore wanted to collaborate with Yunyan Pavilion to publish strange stories from a Chinese studio, but was rejected by Lu Hanyin. Lu Hanyin stood up and said, "Let him in." A moment later, a middle-aged man came up and looked at Lu Hanyin. He pretended to be surprised and said, "It's only been a few days. Shopkeeper Lu, why do you look so haggard?" Lu Hanyin smiled and said, "There are many things I need to do in the shop. Maybe it's because I've been too busy these days and haven't had a good rest." The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "It's not that I want to say this, but shopkeeper Lu is still young. Although business is important, it's not as important as your health. You can do less business, but you can't let your health deteriorate." Lu Hanyin looked at him and said, "Shopkeeper Ren is right." The middle-aged man smiled again and said, "If Yunyan Pavilion's business is too heavy, my Four Seas bookstore doesn't mind helping shopkeeper Lu." Lu Hanyin shook her head and said, "This is my Yunyan Pavilion's business. There's no need for shopkeeper Ren to worry." Shopkeeper Ren sighed and said, "I'm just afraid that if shopkeeper Lu continues like this, your body won't be able to take it. If a person is too tired, it's easy for them to have nightmares at night. They dream of evil spirits coming for their lives." Lu Hanyin suddenly looked at him and asked, "You did it?" Shopkeeper Ren shook his head and said, "What do you mean by I did it? I didn't do anything." "Shopkeeper Lu, please don't frame me." Lu Hanyin took a deep breath and looked at shopkeeper Ren again and said, "As long as you can stop me from having those nightmares, I'll agree to your conditions last time. I don't know what evil spirits are." Shopkeeper Ren smiled and said, "However, I think Miss Lu might be too tired, which is why you often have those nightmares. Why don't we, the Four Seas bookstore, help you share some of the pressure? Naturally, you won't have those nightmares." Lu Hanyin looked at him coldly and said, "Things have come to this. If you still want to hide it, then we have nothing to talk about." Looking at him, the smile on shopkeeper Ren's face gradually disappeared. He said mockingly, "So what if I am? Shopkeeper Lu, you're new here and don't know the situation in Xianxia County. Aren't you a little too naive to think that you can get a share of the profits?" Lu Hanyin asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll report it? Do you think I haven't investigated you? You're an outsider with a maid. How long have you been in Xianxia County? You don't have anyone backing you up. How dare you report this to the authorities?" Shopkeeper Ren curled his lips and said, "Besides, what's the use of reporting to the authorities? Do you have any evidence to prove that I did it?" Lu Hanyin looked at him and suddenly smiled. Shopkeeper Ren's expression froze as he asked, "Why are you laughing?" Lu Hanyin said, "You said something wrong." Shopkeeper Ren asked suspiciously, "What?" Lu Hanyin said, "There's someone backing me up." While shopkeeper Ren was bewildered, a cold iron chain was wrapped around his neck. Zhang Shan kicked him in the butt and said angrily, "You're rebelling. What's the use of reporting to the authorities? Do you think the yamen is run by your family?" Li Mu held the iron chain and looked at the extremely flustered shopkeeper Ren. He said calmly, "Take him away." The Four Seas bookstore and Yunyan Pavilion were competitors, so they had a motive to commit the crime. When shopkeeper Ren admitted that he was involved, Li Mu, Zhang Shan, and Li Si were all present. There were also witnesses. However, this person quibbled on the way there. When he arrived at the court, he flatly denied it. When he was questioned by Jianghu County magistrates, he said firmly, "Sir, this commoner has been wronged. This commoner has always been fair and law-abiding. How could I do such a thing?" Jianghu County magistrates was expressionless. He said, "Raise your head and look at me." Shopkeeper Ren raised his head and looked at Jianghu County magistrates. When their eyes met, the shopkeeper of the Four Seas bookstore suddenly froze. At the same time, Li Mu also noticed that Jianghu County magistrate's eyes seemed to have turned into a deep pool. With just a glance, his gaze seemed to have sunk into it. He hurriedly looked away. At this moment, Jianghu County magistrates looked at shopkeeper Ren and asked calmly, "The Union Pavilion shopkeeper has been haunted by evil spirits recently. Was it your doing?" Shopkeeper Ren nodded mechanically. "Yes." Jianghu County magistrates continued to ask, "Why did you do this?" Shopkeeper Ren said, "The Union Pavilion stole our Four Seas bookstore's business. Their shopkeeper is a woman who just came to Xianxia County not long ago. She has no background, so I wanted to force her to give up a portion of the profits." "Who was the one controlling the evil spirits?" "I found a Taoist priest on the streets and spent 10 taels of silver to ask for his help." "Where is the Taoist priest?" "The Earth Temple in the west of the city." Cultivators were not under the jurisdiction of the government, but if there were any who committed crimes, it would be difficult for them to escape punishment. The imperial court had always had zero tolerance for cultivators who used Taoism to harm others. Those who harmed others' lives would be killed. Those who used evil spirits to harm others to achieve certain goals would be beaten 100 times, crippled of their Taoism, and expelled. Xianxia led people straight to the Earth Temple in the west of the city and found a wandering Taoist priest. The Taoist priest was only at the soul-refining realm. Xianxia sealed his Taoism and brought him to the Yamen. After being identified by shopkeeper Ren, Jianghu County magistrates personally crippled his Taoism and destroyed his dantian, cutting off any possibility of him harming others in the future. As for the shopkeeper of the Four Seas bookstore, as the mastermind behind the scenes, he naturally could not escape punishment. After being beaten 50 times, he was barely alive. In addition, the Four Seas bookstore was closed for 3 months and fined 100 taels of silver as compensation to the shopkeeper of the Union Pavilion. As for the evil spirit, it would be a pity to destroy it. Li Mu simply applied to Jianghu County magistrates to send her to the Jinshan Temple. After all, Xuandu loved to entertain ghosts and demons. Li Mu would treat it as returning a favor to him. Shopkeeper Ren was carried away by 2 constables. Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu and said, "Thank you." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "What are you thanking me for? This case happened in my jurisdiction." Lu Hanyan did not stand on ceremony and said, "Then I'll go back first. Remember to come back for dinner tonight." After Lu Hanyan left, Xianxia, who had been paying attention in this direction, came over and asked Li Mu, "Do you know the female shopkeeper of the Union Pavilion?" Li Mu said, "She's my neighbor." Xianxia looked at him and asked, "Just your neighbor?" Li Mu asked, "What else could it be?" Xianxia asked again, "Is your neighbor married?" Li Mu glanced at him and said, "Why are you asking this?" Xianxia probed, "She's so beautiful and she's not married. Don't you have any other thoughts about her?" Li Mu said impatiently, "What are you trying to say?" Xianxia said, "I just want to ask, if you had to choose between her and Miss Qing, who would you choose?" Li Mu looked at him in confusion and asked, "Why should I choose?" Looking at Li Mu's back as he left, Xianxia touched his chin and fell into deep thought. The best result was, of course, Li Mu and shopkeeper Lu being together. This way there would no longer be an eyesore between him and Li Qing. But what did he mean by that? Why should I choose? Did he mean that he didn't choose one, or did he want both? In the guard room, old Wang looked at Li Mu and said uncertainly, "You want both?" Li Mu nodded. "I want both." Old Wang looked at the books Li Mu picked out and asked, "These books are all basic knowledge before cultivation. You have no use for them, so what do you want them for?" Li Mu said, "I have other uses for them. Anyway, no one is reading these books. Why don't you lend them to me for a few days? I'll return them to you after a few days." Although Li Mu didn't need these books, Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan had just stepped onto the path of cultivation. They still needed to build a foundation and broaden their knowledge. It was unrealistic for Li Mu to explain things about cultivation to them one by one. It was better to give them a few books and let them read by themselves. Old Wang nodded and said, "Okay, remember to return them when you're done." Old Wang was well-read and knowledgeable. Li Mu thought of Wan Wan and asked, "By the way, Old Wang, can ordinary people see wraiths?" Chapter 65. Nope. Lao Wang shook his head and said, "Unless the wraith shows itself or a cultivator opens the third eye for them." Li Mu added, "If the wraith doesn't show itself, then no cultivator opens the third eye for her." Lao Wang looked at him and said, "Then there's only one possibility." Li Mu asked, "What is it?" Lao Wang said, "This person is born with spiritual eyes." Li Mu was stunned. What is born with spiritual eyes? You can understand it as some kind of talent. Lao Wang explained, but this kind of talent is more common in the demon clan. For example, bat demons are born with the ability to attack using sound waves, and those monsters transformed from poisonous insects are very good at using poison. The dragon clan is born with the strength of the middle realm. These can all be attributed to talent. Humans sometimes have this kind of situation. Born with spiritual eyes is equivalent to opening the third eye at all times. It's normal for them to be able to see things that ordinary people can't. Li Mu didn't ask any more questions. He thought about the possibility of Wanwan's natural spiritual eyes. With her courage, she would cry when she saw a female ghost. If she was born with spiritual eyes, why didn't he discover it? Li Mu thought about it again and felt that it was normal for this kind of thing to happen to Wanwan. Although there were demons and ghosts in this world, under the protection of the imperial court, demons and ghosts and humans mostly minded their own business. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to come into contact with these things in their lifetime. Under normal circumstances, spirits and wraith looked like ordinary people. Ghosts were transformed from humans so they had dignity and beauty. If it wasn't a special situation, who would want to make themselves hideous and terrifying with Wanwan's personality? Even if she really saw a ghost, she probably wouldn't be able to tell. This reminded Li Mu of the first time he met Jianghu clan. He only thought of her as an ordinary woman. While Li Mu was thinking, Lao Wang found a book in the corner of the bookshelf. He blew off the thick layer of dust on it and threw it to Li Mu. He said, "There are records about spiritual eyes in this book. Take a look yourself." Lao Wang really had all kinds of books here. Li Mu put the book together with the other books. He left the yamen and bought some talisman paper and cinnabar on the street. After the condensation of the second spirit, he could write a few more talismans, and they were the more practical ones that could expel evil spirits and kill ghosts. These talismans could only be drawn when he needed them. Obviously, there was not enough time, so he had to prepare them in advance and carry them with him. After returning home, Li Mu wrote more than 10 talismans in a row. He only stopped when his mana was almost exhausted. After dinner, he handed 2 talisman exorcism to Yu Hanyun and said, "These 2 talismans have the effect of exorcism. You and Wanwan should carry them with you. Normal ghosts will not be able to get close to you. You can read the books in my study later. They are all about cultivation. You can understand them." Li Mu didn't give the book about spiritual eyes to her. He planned to study it himself first. Yu Hanyun accepted the talisman. Li Mu asked again, "Is the bit of mana I sent into your body still there?" Yu Hanyun nodded and said, "It's still there." People with average talent often needed several months of guidance to produce the first bit of mana in their body. If they had the help of other cultivators to help them familiarize themselves with the flow of mana, this time could be greatly shortened. Even so, those who were slightly talented still needed the help of other cultivators several times before they could condense their mana. Li Mu had a pure yang body and was extremely talented. So he easily retained the mana that Li Qing sent into his body. Li Mu just checked Wanwan's body and found that the mana he sent into her body in the morning had already dissipated. He thought that Yu Hanyun would be the same and would need to try a few more times. He didn't expect that the mana in her body had not dissipated yet. Li Mu looked at her and said in surprise, "Give me your hand." Yu Hanyun stretched out her hand. Li Mu held her hand. Yu Hanyun blushed slightly, but she still allowed him to hold her hand. Li Mu sent a trace of her dermic powers into Lu Hanyun's body. After a cycle, she was surprised to find that not only did the dermic powers she had left in Lu Hanyun's body in the morning did not disappear, but instead increased a little. Although it was only a negligible increase, it showed that her talent for cultivation was not inferior to Li Mu's. Yu Hanyun saw his strange expression and asked nervously, "What's wrong?" Li Mu seemed to have thought of something. He looked at her and asked, "What are your birth characters?" Other than marriage discussions, Yu Hanyun couldn't think of any other time to ask about her birth characters. She asked in confusion, "Why are you asking this?" Li Mu said, "Tell me first. This is very important." Yu Hanyun thought for a moment and said, "Icho xnc ding mao gui mao." Li Mu calculated with his fingers and looked at Yu Hanyun in shock. Li Mu was born in the year of the dragon. His birth characters were Wu Qin, Gung Wu, Bing Wu, Ren Qin. The 4 pillars were pure yang. Yu Hanyun was born in the year of the ox. She was 3 years older than him. Her birth characters were Icho xnc ding mao gui mao. She was the opposite of Li Mu. The 4 pillars were pure yin. Pure yang, pure yin, body of the 5 elements. The soul and the body were great supplements that even demons and heretical cultivation would covet. It was also an excellent body for cultivation. Li Mu used to think that since he had a pure yang body, his cultivation speed would be as fast as cheating. However, he recently realized that although his cultivation speed was not slow, it was far from the description of a pure yang body in the books. The reason why he could condense 2 souls in such a short time was because he collected the 7 emotions very quickly. His cultivation path was different from others. Li Mu had thought about this question before and quickly found the answer. Although his body was still pure yang, his soul belonged to his previous life. Because of this, his cultivation speed was greatly reduced compared to people whose souls and bodies were pure yang. However, Yu Hanyun was different. She had a complete pure yin body. In terms of normal cultivation speed, even Li Mu could not compare to her. Li Mu looked at Yu Hanyun in a daze. She and one had a pure yin body and the other was born with spirit eyes. What kind of master and servant were they? Yu Hanyun saw his strange expression and felt a little uneasy. She asked, "Is there a problem?" Li Mu came back to his senses. He never expected that Yu Hanyun would have such a rare body like him. He looked at Yu Hanyun and asked, "Has anyone told you that you have a rare pure yin body?" As soon as he said this, Yu Hanyun's body trembled and her face immediately turned pale. Li Mu was stunned for a moment and asked, "What's wrong?" Yu Hanyun lowered her head and said with a calm expression, "When I was young, father and mother found a fortune teller. The fortune teller said that a pure yang body and a pure yin body would bring calamity to their loved ones. Father and mother thought that I was inauspicious and sold me to the music hall. Although there was no such thing as a pure yang body and a pure yin body, they would easily attract the covetous of evil beings. To a certain extent, it was not wrong to say that they would bring calamity to the people around them. The cause of death of Li Mu's predecessor was probably because of this." He could only comfort Yu Hanyun by saying, "That fortune teller was obviously a Jianghu swindler. Don't take it to heart." Yu Hanyun looked up and smiled. She said, "You don't have to comfort me. So what if I'm a pure yang body? After so many years, haven't I still survived? There is no such thing as a pure yang body. I also have a pure yang body, but no one has ever said that about me." Li Mu took out the book on the basics of cultivation that Li Qing gave him from the study. He turned to a page and said, "She has a pure yin body. Not only is she not a loner, but she is also a genius in cultivation. Take a look for yourself." "Really?" Yu Hanyun took the book and looked at it expectantly. On the yellowed page there were a few sentences. "People with a pure yang body and a pure yin body have souls that are different from ordinary people's. They are easily coveted by evil beings. If they cultivate, their cultivation speed will be several times faster than ordinary people. A man with a pure yang body and a woman with a pure yin body are a match made in heaven. They can form the great Tao of dual cultivation. Yin and yang combine and complement each other." Yu Hanyun looked up at Li Mu and said suspiciously, "This book? You didn't write it, did you?" Li Mu glanced at the contents of the page and knew that she had misunderstood the latter part of the words. To prevent her from thinking that he was hinting at something, Li Mu shook his head and said, "Don't misunderstand. You are not my type." Chapter 66. Li Mu had some admiration for Lu Hanyun. He admired her independence and self-improvement as a woman. She had traveled thousands of miles from Zhongjun with a servant girl, and in such a short period of time, she had expanded the Yunyan Pavilion to its current scale. Other than admiration, he also craved for her. Of course, it wasn't her body but her cooking skills. Li Mu didn't deny that Lu Hanyun was a very outstanding woman in every aspect. Appearance, figure, cooking skills, wealth, personality. There were probably countless men who dreamed of marrying her. However, to Li Mu this kind of person was fine as a friend. As a wife, he liked the kind of gentle, considerate, cute, obedient girls who knew how to act coquettishly and take care of others. He didn't like overly strong girls. As a man, he preferred to protect his woman, not be protected by a woman or be kept by a woman. Even if Lu Hanyun had a pure yin body and was a natural match for him, feelings were more important than one's constitution. "No, I'm not your type?" Even if Lu Hanyun had never thought of developing a relationship with Li Mu, hearing this answer from his mouth was still a blow. As a woman, she had a figure, looks, cooking skills and money. What reason did he have to not like her? She glanced at Li Mu and asked unhappily, "Then what kind of woman do you like?" In order to reassure Lu Hanyun, Li Mu spoke the truth: cute, obedient, well-behaved, and knows how to take care of others. As for age, it's best if she's younger than me. Cute, obedient, well-behaved, and knows how to take care of others. Lu Hanyun felt that she fit this description very well. It was just that she was older than him by 3 years, but so what if she was older by 3 years? As the saying goes, a woman 3 years older than him would have a gold bar. Moreover, if he had her, it wouldn't be just a gold bar but a pile of gold bars. It would be enough for him to live a carefree life for the rest of his life. Was he looking down on her age? This caused her to be instantly enraged. It wasn't that she liked Li Mu. It was just that she was a woman who had absolute confidence in her looks, figure, and other conditions. Yet, she was ignored and disdained by a man, which made it difficult for her to accept. She opened her mouth and was about to refute when she suddenly thought of something. She looked at Wan, who was swinging under the tree in the yard. Cute, obedient, well-behaved, and knows how to take care of people. She's a little younger than you. She suddenly looked at Li Mu and said warily, "Are you thinking about Wan?" If Lu Hanyan hadn't mentioned it, Li Mu wouldn't have thought about it. After her reminder, Li Mu suddenly realized that if Wan was 2 years older, wouldn't she be his ideal type? No wonder he liked Wan so much and always treated her well. He put away these thoughts and shook his head at Lu Hanyan, saying, "If I'm unlucky, I only have a few months left to live. How would I have the time to think about these things?" Li Mu successfully changed Lu Hanyan's mind. She asked, "Aren't you a cultivator? Don't tell me you can't treat your illness?" To be exact, what I'm suffering from is not an illness. Since Lu Hanyan had also stepped onto the path of cultivation, the things that were inconvenient to talk to her in detail before could be explained now. Deciding to be honest with her, Li Mu continued, "I stepped onto the path of cultivation in order to survive. Humans have 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls. 2 months ago, my 7 physical souls were taken away by a demon. Only by condensing 4 physical souls within half a year can I have a chance to survive." Lu Hanyan listened carefully and asked, "Then how many physical souls have you condensed now?" Li Mu answered, 2 physical souls. Lu Hanyan hurriedly said, "Then hurry up and condense the other 2 physical souls." Condensing the physical souls is not that simple. Li Mu took the opportunity to teach Lu Hanyan about the path of cultivation. He slowly said, "Humans are born with the 7 physical souls. The 7 physical souls are born from the 7 emotions of happiness, anger, sorrow, fear, love, evil, and desire. If you want to condense the 7 physical souls again, you have to accumulate a large amount of the 7 emotions. These 7 emotions need to be generated by others. This is easier said than done, accumulating the 7 emotions." Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and said in realization, "I understand now. The reason why you told stories in the tea house and stopped at the most interesting part every time was to collect the anger of the customers?" Li Mu nodded. Lu Hanyan continued to ask, "Then the reason why you deliberately barbecued meat in the courtyard last time was actually to make me angry and then take away my anger?" Li Mu smiled awkwardly and explained, "I also wanted to survive. You should understand this, right?" Lu Hanyan glared at him but did not pursue the matter. She thought of something else and asked, "You wanted to play Liang Shambua because you wanted to absorb the sadness of the customers, right?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes." Lu Hanyan looked at him with a resentful gaze and said, "You even said that it was your dream." "A man's mouth is a liar," Li Mu said embarrassedly. "I had no choice at the time." Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and continued to ask, "Happiness, anger, sorrow, and fear are easy to obtain. What about love and desire?" This was also Li Mu's headache. He said helplessly, "Let's first condense the first 4 physical souls and live for half a year." Lu Hanyan nodded and said, "I will personally go to the theater and ask them to change the script as soon as possible." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Thank you." Lu Hanyan waved her hand. "What are you thanking me for? I haven't thanked you for teaching me cultivation yet." Speaking of cultivation, Li Mu thought of something and his expression became serious. He said, "There is something you must be careful about." Seeing his serious expression, Lu Hanyan also became serious. She asked, "What is it?" Li Mu said, "The bodies of pure yin and pure yang are indeed suitable for cultivation, but our souls and bodies are also great nourishment for demonic ghosts and evil creatures. Not only are they easy to attract demonic ghosts and evil creatures, they will also attract the covetous eyes of heretical cultivation. In the future you must never tell anyone about your birth date and horoscope, let alone let anyone know that you have a body of pure yin." Lu Hanyan nodded and said solemnly, "I understand. The bodies of pure yang, pure yin, and 5 elements could not be seen from the outside, unless someone knew their birth date and horoscope, or came into close contact with evil creatures that were more sensitive to these types of bodies. That night in the Zhang family village, the zombie did not chase after Hanja and only chased after Li Mu because of this reason." Lu Hanyan closed the introductory book and said, "Let me have a look at this book." This book could help her understand more about cultivation. Li Mu nodded and said, "Take it. Take the other books in the study as well. Remember to return them to me when you're done." Although this book was no longer of any use to Li Mu, it was still a gift from Li Qing. It would not be good to give it to someone else. Lu Hanyin returned home and put the book under her pillow. She said to her servant girl, "Wanwan, go to the opera house and tell the masters to write the script for Transforming into Butterflies in 3 days. Their wages for this month will be doubled." Ren residence. The Four Seas bookstore was closed for 3 months as a punishment and had to pay 100 taels of silver to the shopkeeper of the Yunyan Pavilion. The shopkeeper was also beaten 50 times. In the Ren residence, the servants looked worried. In a room in the inner courtyard, shopkeeper Ren's wails could be heard. A young man walked into the room. When shopkeeper Ren saw him, he immediately said, "Yuan, you have to avenge father." The young man's face darkened. He said, "Didn't I tell you to do business honestly and not engage in these crooked practices? Do you really think those cultivators in the yamen are useless?" Shopkeeper Ren said regretfully, "I thought that woman was new here and did not have any background. Who would have thought that she had someone backing her? All right, let's forget about this matter. Stay at home and recuperate. Don't provoke the yamen again." The young man walked to the bed, stretched out his palm and placed it on shopkeeper Ren's back. A white light flashed on his palm. Shopkeeper Ren climbed up from the bed and said in surprise, "It doesn't hurt anymore?" The young man said faintly, "I've only eliminated your pain. You still need to recuperate. Stay at home and don't think about money all the time. When I'm successful in my cultivation, I'll have as much money as I want." Shopkeeper Ren lay back on the bed and said, "Cultivate well with your master. When your cultivation is successful and you earn a lot of money, buy all the bookstores in Yangqiu County." The young man walked out of the room and went to the deepest courtyard of the Ren residence. He said to the 2 servants at the door, "I want to cultivate in peace. If it's not a big matter, don't disturb me." Chapter 67. Li Mu was practicing his swordsmanship in the yard. Lu Hanyin put a thin book on the stone table in the yard and said, "This is the script of Transforming into Butterflies. Take some time to read it and memorize the lines as soon as possible." Li Mu put down his sword and said in surprise, "So fast?" Wanwan stood aside and said, "Of course it's fast." In order to urge them to finish the script, Miss didn't sleep for 2 nights in a row. Li Mu looked up and saw that Lu Hanyin's originally delicate face was a little haggard at the moment. Her slumbering was more obvious than 2 days ago. He was a little touched. He held his sword with both hands and said, "I can't thank you enough. I will repay you in the future if I have the chance." Lu Hanyin rolled her eyes at him and said, "Don't talk about the future. Teach me how to draw talismans now. After I learn how to draw talismans, I can draw youthful talismans by myself." At this time, only 2 days had passed since Li Mu taught Lu Hanyin how to cultivate. Last night, with the help of Li Mu, she successfully refined the first soul. In order to condense the soul, Li Mu had worked hard to do good deeds like lay feng. He helped the old lady cross the road, cut Zhang Shan's leeks and helped Lin Wan get justice. He collected joy everywhere and finally condensed the first soul. Lu Hanyin only took 2 days to do what Li Mu could do in a month. Of course, it was because Li Mu gave her the remaining strength of the tiger demon's soul from the last time he condensed the soul. The talent of the purine body in cultivation played a greater role. Of course, without the courage of a demon, she would not have been able to refine the second soul so quickly. Lu Hanyin remembered the feeling of rapid improvement in cultivation last night. She couldn't help but lick her lips. She looked at Li Mu and asked, "Did you put anything into my body last night?" "No, not a drop." Li Mu looked at her and said seriously, "You have to be down to earth when you cultivate. Don't always think about taking shortcuts. Otherwise, in the end, if you don't harm others, you will harm yourself." In terms of cultivation, Lu Hanyin only obeyed Li Mu. After being reprimanded by him, she lowered her head and whispered, "I understand." After refining the first soul, Lu Hanyin's mana could already write the 2 most basic Fulu talismans. One was the soul-locking talisman, and the other was the youth-retaining talisman. Li Mu first let her copy the runes of the 2 talismans. Being able to draw the runes in one go was the first step to writing talismans. Lu Hanyin was proficient in many musical instruments and had a pair of skillful hands. Painting and calligraphy were not difficult for her. The difficulty of writing talismans was that she had to eliminate all distracting thoughts and pour her mana into the runes. For beginners, it was impossible to successfully write talismans without a long period of practice. Even for those with a little talent, it would take 10 days to half a month to master it. For those with mediocre talent, it was common for them to practice for several months before they could master it. Lu Hanyin had already failed several times. Her mana was overdrawn and her face was pale, but she was still persevering. Li Mu could see the stubbornness in her personality from the matter of writing talismans. Once she set her mind on something, she would definitely not turn back even if she hit a wall. Li Mu looked at her and comforted, "Why don't you try again tomorrow?" Lu Hanyin's expression was firm and said, "I can definitely do it. I'm so close." Li Mu was worried that she would be exhausted if she continued to persevere, so he took the brush from her hand and said, "Recite with me. Your heart is as clear as ice. Even if the sky collapses, you won't be alarmed." After teaching Lu Hanyin, Li Mu reminded her again, "Just remember this technique. Don't tell anyone else." The art of tranquility did not belong to the category of Taoist techniques, but it was very effective in situations where one needed to calm down and concentrate. After learning the art of tranquility, Lu Hanyin only failed once before she successfully drew a face-retaining talisman. In this world, the art of tranquility was a secret technique that only Li Mu knew. It was different from the art of leading in. If it wasn't for the fact that Lu Hanyin stayed up late to help him write the script, Li Mu wouldn't be so generous as to teach her. Using sincerity to exchange for sincerity, this was what Li Si taught Li Mu. Although Li Si said that it was to pick up girls, it could be used in other situations as well. Speaking of which, he couldn't favor one and discriminate against the other. Since he taught it to Lu Hanyin, he should find a chance to teach it to Li Qing as well. Although Lu Hanyin was also kind to him, it wasn't 10 to 20% of Li Qing's kindness to him. And from Li Qing, Li Mu had never asked for anything in return. When Li Mu found Li Qing in the guard room, she was cultivating with her eyes closed. The lower three realms of cultivation were soul refining, soul condensing, and spirit concentrating. Soul refining was to refine the 7 souls, allowing the cultivator to completely control the body. Soul condensing was actually soul refining. It was the process of the cultivator gradually controlling the 3 souls. In this realm, the cultivator's soul gradually grew stronger and could freely enter and leave the body. Moreover, when the soul was in the state of leaving the body, it could still retain part of its strength. Spirit concentrating was the last realm of the lower 3 realms of cultivation. At this realm, the cultivator's 3 souls merged into one and completely transformed into the primordial spirit. Even if the body died, the primordial spirit could leave the body and enter a new body to be reborn. As long as the primordial spirit was not destroyed, the cultivator would not truly die. 4 cultivators in the spirit concentrating realm, their cultivation was all in the primordial spirit. Even if the body died and only the primordial spirit was left, their strength would not be weakened too much. This was similar to monsters in human form. Although the lizard spirit and the tiger spirit's body died, their souls were still strong. However, after they turned into souls, they would be more afraid of thunder arts and Buddha's light. Li Mu walked into the guard room. Li Qing slowly opened her eyes and asked, "Did something happen in your cultivation?" "No." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I came across a spell by chance. It can clear the heart and restrain the mind. When I use it when I'm writing talismans, it can stabilize the mind and increase the success rate of writing talismans." He handed a piece of paper to Li Qing and said, "This is the spell." Li Qing did not take it. She shook her head and said, "There are many spells of calming the heart and clearing the heart in Taoism, but none of them have this effect. Even in the 6 ancestral courts, this spell can be called a top-notch spell. It's very precious. I can't accept it." Li Mu put the paper on the table in front of Li Qing and said, "Boss taught me cultivation, saved my life and gave me a book and a sword. What's this little spell?" Li Mu had many Taoist spells and scriptures. The clear heart spell was the least effective among them. It was not that Li Mu did not want to give her something good. With Li Qing's kindness to him, it was not too much to ask Li Mu to repay her with his body. It was just that Li Mu himself had not figured out the 9 words mantra. If he took it out like this, he would not even be able to come up with an excuse. Although this little clear heart spell could not repay Li Qing's kindness, they lived under the same roof every day and had many opportunities to interact. In the future, there would be plenty of opportunities to slowly repay her. After all, the future was long. Putting the paper on the table, Li Mu smiled at Li Qing and said, "Boss, continue cultivating. I'm going out to patrol. Wait a moment." Li Qing glanced at the paper on the table and said nothing. She only looked at Li Mu and asked, "You've already condensed corpse dog and concealed arrow. Which one are you going to condense next?" Li Mu embarrassedly said, "Sparrow shade." Li Qing continued to ask, "Have you thought about how to collect grief?" Li Mu nodded and told her his idea. That's actually a good idea. Only you could think of it. Li Qing smiled and said, go. I'll leave the matters of the Yamen to Zhang Shan and Li Si. You just need to focus on condensing the soul. Li Mu stood at the door and did not immediately walk out. Li Qing looked at Li Mu standing at the door and asked, is there something else? Li Mu smiled and said, boss, you look really good when you smile. You should smile more often. Li Qing froze for a moment. Then her gaze wandered for a moment and she said, go on patrol. Zhang Shan, who had just returned from his patrol and was preparing to rest in the duty room, stood outside the door, his eyes wide open. A moment later, on the Weiyang Street, he wrapped his arm around Li Mu's shoulder and said in shock, Li Mu, are you crazy? You even dare to tease the boss. Aren't you afraid that the boss will get angry? Li Si walked by his side and said, a woman will never get angry because you praise her beauty. Zhang Shan asked in return, is the boss an ordinary woman? Li Si looked at him and said, immortals are also women. Li Si spoke of great principles, but Li Mu had no choice but to accept it. Just now he had blurted out what was on his mind on a whim. He did not know if she would get angry. When they reached the door of the Yunyan Pavilion, Li Mu temporarily put aside his thoughts about Li Qing and focused on condensing the sparrow shade. For him, what he needed to condense was not just the third soul. There was also the dignity of a man. Chapter 68. Li Mu had already memorized the script of transforming into a butterfly with the help of the clear mind technique. Lu Hanyin asked him to come to the theater to rehearse when he was free. 1 minute on stage was 10 years of practice off stage. Before officially going on stage, everyone had to memorize the script thoroughly and rehearse it in advance without any mistakes. Only then could they walk from behind the scenes to the front of the stage. When shopkeeper Huang saw Li Mu, he ran over eagerly and said, young master, you're here. Please change into your costume first. We'll start rehearsing in a while. Li Mu needed the audience to feel sad for him. Naturally, the more miserable the character he played, the better. Who else could he choose to play Liang Shanbo? However, in fact, he wasn't very sure if he could collect sadness in this way. If he couldn't, he would let Li Qing break his legs and pretend to be a beggar. He would beg at the city gate. A man should be more ruthless to himself. Survival was always the first priority. Dignity and other things could be abandoned in the face of life. Because it was just a rehearsal, Li Mu changed into his costume and didn't put on makeup. He sat backstage. After a while, he saw shopkeeper Huang coming over with another handsome scholar in costume. Li Mu looked at the handsome scholar's face. No matter how he looked at it, it was familiar. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen it before. The handsome scholar crossed his arms and asked, what's wrong? You don't recognize me? Li Mu looked at Lu Hanyin and said in surprise, why are you dressed like this? Because I'm acting in a heroic stage. Lu Hanyin looked at him proudly and asked, how is it? Do I look like you? Needless to say, Lu Hanyin was beautiful. After dressing up as a man, she immediately became a heroic young man. If she walked on the street, she would probably attract a lot of ignorant girls. That sounds like it. Li Mu nodded, then he thought of something and asked, wait, do you know how to act? As the female lead of Liangzhu, Zhu Yingtai had a lot of scenes and lines in the drama. If she screwed up, she would just lose a few customers. However, to Li Mu he would lose a bunch of leaks. No, he would lose the hope of condensing the sparrow shade and becoming a real man. This was not something for her to play with. Lu Hanyin glanced at him and said, if you don't believe me, I can arrange for someone else to act in Yingtai. Although Auntie Wang is in her 50s, her basic skills are solid. Acting as a young woman in her 20s shouldn't be a problem. Li Mu said without hesitation, of course I believe you. Liangzhu was a couple in the drama. Although there weren't any restricted scenes, it was inevitable for them to hold hands and hug. If he had to choose between Auntie Wang and Lu Hanyin, Li Mu would still choose her. The only thing he was worried about was that Zhu Yingtai was going to dress up as a man. If he let Li Qing act, she wouldn't need any props and would just wear a loose costume. No one would be able to tell. However, Lu Hanyin was different. Unless the audience was blind, they would be able to tell at a glance. Li Mu subconsciously looked at her and noticed that her originally bulging chest had become flat. After being stunned for a moment, he couldn't help but ask, don't you feel uncomfortable from being strangled? Lu Hanyin lowered her head and said in embarrassment, it's none of your business. Li Mu was also worried that she would hurt herself. It wouldn't be good if she hurt her body in order to satisfy her desire for acting. However, since Lu Hanyin didn't care, he couldn't say anything more. He said, since you're ready, let's start rehearsing. While the two were rehearsing on the other side of the theater, several actors gathered there and looked at the two figures not far away. One of them was puzzled and said, transforming into butterflies is such a good script. Why did you find a newcomer to act as the lead? Isn't this messing around? The person next to him looked at him and said, yeah, I thought you would act as Xianxia. This is a rare opportunity to show your face. I don't know what you're thinking. That person listened to Li Mu's clumsy lines and sighed. He said, I'm really not convinced. How am I not better than him? Lu Hanyan was a professional. Not only was she proficient in musical instruments, but she was also good at singing. Li Mu was completely a layman. After the two of them rehearsed their lines, Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, you can't go on stage directly like this. A real actor knows how to arouse the emotions of the guests. When they act as the bad guys, they can make the guests hate them so much that they even forget that this is acting and rush to the stage to curse. When they act as the good guys, they can gain the sympathy of the guests and make the guests cry for them. Your acting is too stiff. Even if you act as Xianxia, you can't move the guests and get their grief. Grief was a very important thing. Li Mu also became serious and said, I'll think about it carefully. Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, a good actor takes 10 years to become a beginner, 20 years to become an actor, and 30 to 50 years to become a master. In this line, without the guidance of a master, it's difficult to understand anything. Li Mu asked, is there any quick way? There's no quick way to improve your acting skills. You can only practice hard. Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and said, come to my room tonight. We'll rehearse our lines as many times as possible. On the other side of the theater building, the young man just now lowered his head and said, I'm convinced. Li Mu thought that he could gain the grief of the guests by acting as Xianxia. After he really understood the line of actors, he found that he was too naive. Outstanding actors and excellent performances could indeed move the hearts of the guests and control their emotions. However, all of these people had more than 10 years of acting experience. Acting was not a matter of wearing a costume and reciting lines at all, not to mention the expression and movements. Just the foundation of the lines was a hurdle that Li Mu could not cross in a short time. It was late at night. Li Mu leaned against Lu Hanyan's bed and sighed, it's so difficult. Lu Hanyan covered her mouth and yawned. She said, every line is not easy. It's impossible to reach the level of the masters without 10 years of hard work. I'm sorry for making you practice with me so late. Li Mu stood up and said, you should rest early. I'm going back. Lu Hanyan nodded and asked, if the acting doesn't work, what are you going to do next? What else can I do? Li Mu sighed and said, I can only break my legs and go outside to beg for sympathy. Lu Hanyan was stunned and asked, are you so cruel to yourself? Li Mu said helplessly, if I'm not cruel to myself, I'll lose my life. Humans have 7 souls and 2 souls are born from love and lust. Lu Hanyan seemed to have thought of something and continued to ask, what are you going to do about love? You can't go and harm so many girls, right? Li Mu didn't even have the chance to collect grief, let alone love. He could only say, we'll talk about it in the future. Lu Hanyan continued to ask, love is fine, but what about lust? Li Mu lowered his head and looked at his own body, then looked at Lu Hanyan and shook his head. We'll talk about it in the future. After another night of studying the lines, Li Mu remembered that he hadn't visited Suhi in a few days. He personally cooked a few dishes and went to Clearwater Bay. As Suhi ate, she said, next time remember to bring me a jar of wine. Is the wine shop in the east of the city still there? I really like their autumn dew wine. I haven't drunk it in 20 years. As she spoke, she saw Li Mu's absent-minded appearance and asked, what's wrong? Is there something on your mind? Is there another difficult case in the Yamen? Li Mu shook his head and told her about the problems he'd encountered in the past 2 days. Suhi glanced at him and smiled. That's normal. It's the same no matter what line of work you do. You don't want to use your 3 to 5 days of interest to compete with someone who's been eating for decades, do you? Li Mu sighed and said, if there's really no other way, I'll just have to go to the city gates and beg. That's not necessary. Suhi put down her chopsticks and said, a good actor can act like a character in a play, but in the end, it's just acting. They can't act out the full charm. If you're a character in a play, why do you need to act? Li Mu was confused. I'm a character in a play? What do you mean? You can hypnotize yourself to forget Li Mu, forget your identity as a bailiff, and think that you're a character in a play. Once you've really deceived yourself, you'll really be a character in a play, Suhi explained. She looked at Li Mu and asked, this is a type of illusion technique. Do you want to learn it? Li Mu swallowed his saliva and said, yes. Suhi crossed her arms in front of her chest. Call me sister and I'll teach you. It was just calling her sister. As long as he could gather grief and condense the sparrow-een, Li Mu would agree without hesitation even if he called her wife, let alone sister. He was secretly delighted. Looking at Suhi, he blurted out, "Wife?" Chapter 69. Suhi was stunned and asked, "What?" She tilted her head and looked at Li Mu. "Wife?" Bah. He was too excited just now and made a mistake. Li Mu's face turned red and he quickly said, "I'm sorry I called you wrongly. Miss Su, Sister Su, please." Suhi glanced at him and continued, "Illusion is a spell to bewitch people. Not only can it be used to bewitch others but it can also be used to bewitch oneself. Bewitching people was a type of ghost spell. In the ghost stories on the market, there were often scenes of scholars being bewitched by female ghosts and sucked dry their young energy and blood essence. The difference was that Li Mu was bewitching himself. He knew the story of Jianghu. As long as he hypnotized himself and told himself that he was Liang Shanbo, he could naturally immerse himself in Liangzhu's situation and become the character itself, not just a simple performance. Li Mu used the method Suhi taught him. After failing several times, he finally found the trick and could easily enter the plot. "Thank you, Sister Su." Li Mu clasped his fist and said, "When I condense the third soul, I will thank you properly." Bah. Suhi spat and asked, "The third soul is the sparrow-ine. After you condense the sparrow-ine, how are you going to thank me?" "Of course it's to cook." Li Mu realized the loophole in his words and quickly explained, "Next time what do you want to eat? Just tell me, I will definitely bring it for you." Suhi rolled her eyes at him and said with some regret, "I really want to see how you act on the stage." Unfortunately what?" Li Mu said in surprise, "You can go and watch. I will save a good seat for you." Suhi was already a ghost cultivator and not a low-level ghost. Even if she wandered in the human world, as long as she didn't take the initiative to harm people, the government wouldn't provoke her. "I won't go." Suhi faintly smiled and gave her a meaningful look. She said, "I hope you can quickly condense the sparrow's ine and become a true man who can support the heavens and earth." Li Mu packed up the food box and said, "Then I'm leaving. I'll come to see you another day." "Wait." Suhi suddenly called out to him. "Is there anything else?" Li Mu turned around and asked. Suhi smiled sweetly at him and said, "You gave me strange stories from a Chinese studio and called me your wife. If you really have any thoughts about me, why don't I help you become a ghost cultivator? Then you can." Li Mu knew that she was teasing him out of habit, so he said indifferently, "If one day I really die and my soul doesn't disperse, I'll come to Clearwater Bay to accompany you." Every time he came to Suhi's place he would gain something. Li Mu decided to come here more often in the future. On his way back from Clearwater Bay, he saw Lu Hanyan pacing back and forth in front of the gate. Lu Hanyan looked at the food box in his hand and asked in confusion, "Where did you go?" Li Mu said, "I went to visit a friend." Lu Hanyan didn't ask any more questions. She said, "It's good that you're back. Let's continue practicing. The sooner we finish practicing, the sooner we can go on stage. The sooner you can escape from danger." Lu Hanyan seemed to be even more anxious than him about condensing the soul. Li Mu went home and changed his clothes, then practiced with her in the courtyard. Lu Hanyan quickly entered the role of Zhuing Tai. She held his hand and turned her head to the side. She said sadly, "Brother Liang, Ingtai can't marry you in this life. We can only wait for the next life to be together." Li Mu used the art of charm on himself and turned into Liang Shanbua. He covered his mouth and coughed a few times. He said sadly, "The world is ruthless, the world is rude. So be it. The sedan will carry your Ma family home. The autumn wind will send me to the Yellow Springs." Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu in a daze. For a moment she didn't know how to respond. It wasn't that she forgot her lines. It was just that in one night, Li Mu's acting had changed dramatically. Before, his lines were still a bit stiff and his performance was a bit exaggerated. But now, his lines were smooth and his movements were skillful. He was even better than those old masters who had decades of experience. Lu Hanyan almost thought that he was Liang Shanbua. Li Mu finally got into the mood, but he was interrupted by Lu Hanyan's pause. He came out of the art of charm and asked her, "What's wrong?" Lu Hanyan looked up at him and said in surprise, "It's only been one night. How did you improve so much?" Li Mu said, "Maybe last night I realized the essence of acting." Lu Hanyan was puzzled. "What is it?" "Real." Li Mu explained, "When I'm not acting Liang Shanbua, I'm showing the real Liang Shanbua in front of everyone. There's no trace of acting. Naturally it won't make people feel stiff. Everyone knows this, but it's not that easy to do." Lu Hanyan looked at him with an inexplicable gaze. She said, "Li Mu, you're really a genius. It's a pity that you're not an actor. Li Mu's dream was to become a real man, not an actor. He shook his head and said, "Let's not talk about this. Let's continue." The people of Xianxia County didn't have many entertainment activities on a daily basis. Those who had read books and knew a few words when they were bored, they could read all kinds of stories and novels to comfort their hearts. Most people could only drink tea, listen to stories or songs. Only those who lived a luxurious life were willing to spend a few more copper coins to go to the opera house to listen to opera. A group of guests walked in from outside the Yunyan Pavilion's opera house. The opera house released a new play today called Transforming into a Butterfly. Because the story of Transforming into a Butterfly had been popular in the tea house for a while, and later in the bookstore, most of the people of Xianxia County had heard about it from others even if they hadn't read it. Before releasing Transforming into a Butterfly, the opera house had done publicity a few days in advance. Many people who had heard the story of Transforming into a Butterfly had bought tickets a few days in advance, waiting to see the first performance of the new play. Two pitiful people. Why didn't they have a good ending? That Ma family is really a good for nothing. They're always trying to break up a couple. Liang Zhu transforms into a butterfly. It makes my heart ache. Even though they already knew the content of the story, the feelings generated from hearing it and seeing it were completely different. The actors acted out this poignant love story vividly, incisively and vividly. When they saw Uncle Shambua die of illness, Ingtai jump into the grave on the way to her wedding, and the two turn into butterflies and fly away, their hearts were filled with deep sorrow. Some of the more emotional onlookers even shed tears. The curtains slowly pulled down, and the first performance of Transforming into a Butterfly came to an end. The audience sat below the stage. They were infected by the poignant sadness and shed tears of sadness. Li Mu stood on the stage, absorbing the endless sadness. He couldn't stop smiling. His idea was right. If he told the story of Liang Zhu purely as a story, he wouldn't be able to absorb other people's sadness. However, if he transformed into Uncle Liang himself and used his superb acting skills to let the audience put themselves in the situation and think that he was Uncle Liang himself, he would naturally be able to absorb other people's emotions. Appropriately guiding other people's emotions was cultivation. Excessive plundering was harvesting. After countless experiments, Li Mu had found a balance. He could ensure that he didn't cause any harm to those people's bodies when he needed it. This way, as the number of guests increased, he would only need 10 days at most to accumulate enough sadness to condense the sparrow shade in one fell swoop. Transforming into a Butterfly was a popular story in Xianxia County. After Yunyan Pavilion moved it to the stage, guests flocked to it. Even though Yunyan Pavilion arranged 2 performances a day, it couldn't satisfy all the guests' needs. It wasn't until 10 days later, when most people had watched Transforming into a Butterfly once or even twice, that the number of guests in the theater gradually decreased. Early morning. Li Mu sprung up from the bed and subconsciously reached into the quilt. At this moment he had the urge to cry. In these 10 days he had asked for leave from Li Qing and performed 2 performances a day with Lu Hanyan, absorbing the emotions of hundreds and thousands of people. It took him 10 whole days to collect enough sadness and successfully condense the third soul last night. The third soul that Li Mu had been longing for a long time. This morning he once again regained his dignity as a man. The depression that had accumulated in his heart for the past 2 months was swept away. Li Mu opened the courtyard door and felt that the world had become much more beautiful. Creak. The courtyard door next to him opened and Lu Hanyan walked out with a basin of water. When she saw Li Mu, she was clearly stunned. Then she asked in surprise, "Why are you up so early today?" Li Mu let out a long sigh and said, "I can wake up in the morning from now on. Isn't it just waking up one day early? Why are you so proud?" Lu Hanyan glanced at him and suddenly said, "Right, the soul that was born from sadness seems to be called the sparrow shade. It sounds very strange. What does this soul do?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "You're a girl. Why are you asking so much?" Chapter 70. In less than 3 months, Li Mu had already condensed 3 spirits. 4 of the 7 spirits. Within half a year he would not die because of the decay of the body. Now Li Mu was 1 spirit away, and he would be able to completely break away from the Taoist priest's half-a-year prophecy. The first 3 spirits had already been condensed. The last 4 spirits were related to fear, love, evil, and lust. Li Mu carefully thought about it and first eliminated love and lust. Condensing a spirit required a huge amount of emotions, at least hundreds or even thousands of people. Even if Li Mu was confident in his face, it was impossible to make so many women fall in love with him at the same time. Reducing the quantity and increasing the quality was a good idea. If there was an assembled gods practitioner who loved him to death, and was willing to take the initiative to offer love, then with just one person within 3 to 5 days, Li Mu could successfully condense a spirit. But a female assembled gods practitioner was not so easy to find. Li Mu knew a woman with this level of cultivation, Li Qing, and she was wholeheartedly focused on cultivation. With a pure heart and few desires, it was impossible for her to have such feelings for him. Moreover, love cannot be forced. This path was basically impossible. As for lust, it gave Li Mu an even bigger headache. Until now he had only seen it on Lu Hanyan, and it was only that one time he could not be naked in front of her every day. Thinking of this, Li Mu's mind suddenly flashed. Since he could not directly capture the heart of a female assembled gods practitioner, why not cultivate one himself? Lu Hanyan had a pure Yin body, her cultivation speed was astonishing. If he could make her fall in love with him early, when she reached assembled gods, wouldn't he be able to harvest both love and lust? Sitting opposite Li Mu eating breakfast, Lu Hanyan suddenly sensed something, raised her head to look at Li Mu and asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Li Mu forgot that Lu Hanyan had already condensed her first soul. Her perception was amazing. He immediately looked away and focused on eating. At the same time he also dispelled his previous thoughts. Raising someone was too shameful. If Lu Hanyan knew what he was thinking, the first thing she would do after concentrating would be to fight Li Mu to the death. For the time being, there was no way to harvest fear in large quantities. Li Mu once thought that since he could collect sadness through acting, he could also collect evil feelings if he played a character full of evil and hateful. However, by using the art of seduction to immerse himself in the role, Li Mu was experiencing Liang Shambua's life over and over again. The audience was sad, but Li Mu was even sadder. After each performance, Li Mu needed to use the clear heart art to adjust for a long time before he could recover from that state. If it weren't for his determination to condense the sparrow shade, he probably wouldn't have been able to last 10 days. Another important point was that when he was acting he always told himself that he was Liang Shambua, that Zhu Yingtai was the woman he liked, and that Lu Hanyan was Zhu Yingtai in the play. After doing this many times, Li Mu would occasionally have some kind of impulse when he was with Lu Hanyan outside the play. If he used this method to play someone else, Li Mu was worried that he would really have schizophrenia and be unable to distinguish between the play and the play. At that time, although the 7 souls would be condensed, he would also go crazy. After breakfast, Li Mu slowly walked to the county government. In the past 10 days, in order to collect sadness, he had been at the theater and hadn't gone to the government office even once. If he didn't go now, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to suppress Li Qing. In the government office, Constable Zhou first helped Li Mu cancel his leave and said, "I heard from Miss Qing that you're sick. How are you? Are you feeling better?" "Much better." Li Mu smiled and didn't say much. He asked, "Where's the boss?" "Miss Qing and the others just left the government office. You should be able to catch up with them now." Constable Zhou shook his head and said, "Recently Yangqiu County is really not peaceful. First there were zombies. Yesterday there was a strange murder outside the city. Miss Qing and Hanja brought people to investigate the case. Li Qing, Zhang Shan and Li Si were not there. Li Mu was bored to be on duty alone. He asked Constable Zhou about the direction they left in and then used the light body skill to chase after them. Li Mu chased all the way out of the county, but he didn't catch up with Li Qing and Hanja. Instead he caught up with Zhang Shan, Li Si and 2 other constables first. Zhang Shan was in the midst of jogging, panting heavily. Hearing the commotion behind him, he turned around and asked, "Li Mu, what have you been up to these past few days?" Li Mu asked, "Where's the boss?" Zhang Shan pointed ahead and said, "In front." They walked too fast. We couldn't catch up. Li Mu didn't go with Zhang Shan and the others. His figure flashed a few times and disappeared from their sight. Zhang Shan sighed and said, "Ever since Li Mu followed the boss to cultivate, he's become more and more powerful. The gap between us and him is getting bigger and bigger." Li Si looked ahead and said, "Don't you feel that Li Mu has changed a lot recently?" Zhang Shan nodded and said, "He has changed a lot. He has become bolder. In the past he was even more timid than me. Now he dares to fight zombies. Do you think that after a person dies once they really get over it?" Li Si glanced at him and said, "I haven't died before. How would I know?" Li Mu ran for a while and saw 2 figures in front of him from afar. Li Qing and Hanja stood on the mountain path. 2 corpses were placed on the side of the mountain path. Hanja glanced at Li Mu and looked away. Li Qing bent down and checked the 2 corpses. She said, "Judging from the wounds, it should be done by demons." Li Mu walked forward and found that the two corpses were male. One was about 40 years old and the other looked only 20 years old. Their necks were bitten off by something and their blood was sucked dry. At first glance, it was obvious that it was done by demons. Li Qing stood up and asked, "Have you investigated the identity of the deceased?" Xianxia said, "It's been investigated clearly. They are the father and son of a hunter in this mountain. 2 days ago they went hunting in the mountain. This morning, their bodies were found by a woodcutter who immediately came to the county office to report the case." Li Qing thought for a moment and asked, "Has the woodcutter investigated it?" Xianxia nodded and said, "I checked with a magic item. There is no problem." He turned to look at the two corpses on the ground and said, "There is no trace of the demon at the scene. How should we investigate it?" When the county government investigated a case, there must be clues. For example, in the case of the weasel, it could be easily tracked down with a fulu based on the hair it left at the scene. In the case of the zombie in Jianghu village, as long as one knew the habits of the zombie, they could also wait for the zombie to walk into the trap. There was no clue to investigate such a case without any clues. We can only start by investigating the nearby demons. Li Qing took out a demon-seeking talisman and threw it into the air. The fulu floated in the air, swaying left and right. After a while it floated down again. Xianxia shook his head and said, "There is no response from the demon-seeking talisman. There is no demon within a radius of 5 kilometers. It seems that the demon has already run away." Taoism had many magical spells that could be used in the process of investigating a case. For example, the shopkeeper of the Four Seas bookstore. Even if he had denied it before, after being checked by the Jianghu County magistrates, he still told the truth. According to the clues left at the scene of the crime, using the fulu or magic to find the murderer was a common method to solve a case. Even so, the county government still couldn't solve most of the cases every year. Li Mu's gaze swept past the two corpses. Soon, he shifted his gaze back with a doubtful look on his face. His heavenly eye could see through the 7 spirits of people. He couldn't see through Li Qing and Xianxia because they had already refined the 7 spirits. There was no reason why they couldn't see through these 2 ordinary people. The only possibility was that the 7 spirits of these 2 corpses had already dissipated. After a person died, the 3 spiritual souls would dissipate immediately. However, it would take 7 days for the 7 spirits to dissipate. Even if the hunters had been killed for 2 days, there should be at least 5 spirits left. However, when Li Mu checked with his heavenly eye, he found that there was not a single spirit left in the 2. He thought for a moment and looked at Li Qing. He asked, "Boss, when a demon sucks the essence and blood of a human, will it also suck away the 7 spirits?" Li Qing shook her head and said, "No, the 7 spirits belong to the physical body. If a low-level demon wants to obtain the spirit of a human, it will have to eat the human as blood food." Li Mu pointed at the 2 corpses and asked in confusion, "Then why are their 7 spirits gone?" Li Qing looked at him and asked in confusion, "You can see the 7 spirits of a human?" The 7 spirits were different from the 3 spiritual souls. Even a cultivator in the 3 middle realms might not be able to see through them at a glance. With Li Qing's cultivation in the spirit realm, she couldn't do this. Li Mu nodded and said, "I once learned a magical ability by accident. It can see through a person's 3 spiritual souls and 7 spirits." He glanced at Xianxia and walked to Li Qing's side. He whispered a few words in her ear. Xianxia really wanted to know what this magical ability was, but Li Mu clearly didn't want him to hear. He could only stand far away. The heavenly eye was only a magical use of mana. After Li Qing used the method Li Mu taught her, she looked at Li Mu. She saw that his body was flashing red, gray and white. She asked in surprise, "You've condensed the sparrow-ine?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I just condensed it last night." Li Qing looked again at the 2 corpses on the ground. As expected, not only were their 3 spiritual souls gone, even their 7 spirits were gone. Her expression became serious and she said, "This is not a simple case of a demon harming a human. Let's have someone carry the corpses back to the yamen." That you're tuning in to the Phantom Sword Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.